In this academy, only half of you will survive to the second year, and anyone is considered lucky to actually finish this. That's why they say finishing Delayton isn't an achievement, it's a miracle. And on the very first day in the first test, the professor made it clear, 20 minutes to finish or they would be expelled on the spot. Everyone's rushed in despair, but that level of rune knowledge was way too advanced. And then a sheet of paper torn clean in half. The girl Krista Warden, the most promising genius of her generation, just watched her only chance at passing vanish. She thinks she made a mistake. She thinks the wind caught it, but she doesn't realize someone in this room just sabotaged her. The boy sitting beside just took a look to the mana flow and traced the mana chain back to the source. Wind magic. Silent, colorless. The culprit? The blonde prodigy some rows ahead, smiling and pretending like nothing happened. 8 minutes left. Krista is rewriting everything from scratch. Hand shaking, pen flying. She tells Rain to hand over his paper so she can copy the answers, but he pulls it away. He tells her the method she's using won't work in time. She asks how he could possibly know that without trying. He says the work can still be done. It's just too much for that method. So he grabs the pen himself and began to cook. But before they can even stand up, the blonde kid beats them to it. Hubert, the runner-up genius of Delayton, the pride of Rohunum Academy, the same guy who tore their paper with invisible wind magic and thought nobody noticed. He slaps his answers on the professor's desk like he's already won. The professor casts the analysis spell, checks the runes, checks the response time, and says it's not bad, but it's not great either. A problem like this should only take 2 minutes. Grade C. The kid can't accept it. He says he finished first. He says he used the perfect formula. And that's when the professor drops it. He mentions the wind magic. He knew the whole time. Hubert's face goes white. That's when Rain walks up and just hands over the paper. The professor laughs, says it's a shame they finished, because he was really looking forward to expelling his duo. Rain just says if someone can't use magic because of a light breeze, they shouldn't be called a mage. The professor snatches the paper. The magic circle is wrong. Not wrong as in broken, wrong as in different. Rain used a fan shape for one circle and a standard for the other. Nobody does that. The professor asks why. Rain explains, it works better with the water attribute. If you meet the runes requirements with a simple first-degree equation, the acceleration time kicks in. The professor is impressed that a regular student even knows that, but the professor says knowing theory is one thing, actually pulling it off is another, so he tells Rain to prove it. He starts casting, says he can't wait to watch that ego deflate. Papers start glowing. Something flashes like a massive Amana star, and it starts raining. Inside the classroom, everyone is frozen. The professor starts clapping, slowly. 13 years of teaching, plenty of geniuses, but never, not once, an answer like that. Grade S. Bro didn't react, just walked past Hubert and said, next time, I won't let it slide. So how did a kid with 0 credentials just humiliate the top prodigies of the 8 great schools on day 1? Let's rewind just 300 years back in the tallest magic tower in the empire. There was a boy who didn't care about the world. Lin, the youngest mage in history to reach 4 stars, an orphan from the slums who got thrown into a tower full of books and never left. His only goal was reaching 7 stars, the level where they say you can see the truth of the world. Bros was on that locked-in phase, until a silver-haired shoddy walked into his library, called his name 3 times while he ignored her, teased him about him being a baby who couldn't handle her, took a fireball threat to the face, backed into a bookshelf, and got buried under a pile of books, and for the first time in years he smiled. Her name was Esther, a fake warrior with a modified body and a shortened life. She knew she was going to die young, and instead of hiding from it, she was recruiting people to save the world before her time ran out. Lin asked if there was anything fun about it. She looked him dead in the eyes and said one word, the world. He didn't join to save anyone. He joined because she made him curious. This was an unbeatable, insane party. Each member was the pinnacle of their role, and even though Lin was the youngest, it was clear that he held a potential never seen before. See all those smile, my bro? Yeah, we know tragedy is about to struck. In the end of their journey when they were in their final battle, bro caught a rare abyss poison, something that had no cure, no treatment. Bro, this nigga didn't give up. He carved an immortality seal into his own heart. His body froze. He promised Esther he'd come back. This spell is only undone when the user's body is completely healed, so she held his hand and promised she'd wait while bro was turning into a full-blown popsicle. All this dude wanted was to find out the 7th circle level and uncover the truth. And now 300 years later, a boy named Rain wakes up in someone else's body, walks into a public square and sees 4 statues of the people he used to eat dinner with their death dates carved in stone. So no, Rain isn't some nobody who got lucky on a test. He's the original, the one who invented the formula the entire class was using, revered by everyone as the Saint Mage, but of course he just can't tell anyone. After class, Krista calls out to Rain. When he asks what she wants, she kind of embarrassed thanks him for earlier. With a serious look, he asks her to say it again because he didn't catch it. Turning red, she tells him not to make it worse and says she'll pay him back so he shouldn't get full of himself, because more than anything, they're rivals. While she's pointing a finger at Rain, some people walk by gossiping about Professor Owen giving out an S grade. They ask if it was for Hubert, but then someone says it was actually for Krista, which, they say, makes sense. They also mention that on the paired test, Krista ended up on the same team as that famous academic genius. The next day, at the academy, Rain reminded Krista about her promise to pay him back the next time she saw him and asked what floor the girl's dorm was on. She said his room was probably on the top floor because of his entrance exam score and that she'd warned him not to show off so much. He shot back that, show off or not, she was the one who said making promises you can't keep makes you look shallow. Starting off, she angrily told him to just wait a little longer. As Rain walked into the dorm, some guy muttered about him being the top-ranked student and the oldest son of the Ludwig family. Standing in front of a door, Rain wondered if this was really his room. With an amulet in hand, he opened it. Then he realized it was a private room. Walking over to the desk, he said the place reminded him of his time in the magic tower. Even in his past life, he'd been locked up in a room like that, doing nothing but studying magic. For a brief moment, he thought of Esther. Lying down on the bed, he figured that aside from the first class, there wasn't much else to do. He wondered if he should sneak into the Vatican to look for his remains, but infiltrating the place with this identity would be tough. Using a few magic circles, he tried to cast a spell, but to his surprise, it failed. Looks like he still wasn't ready for 4-star magic. Suddenly, an owl landed on his window, startling him. It dropped off a wooden box. Rain noticed there was no sender and wondered if his father had sent it. Inside were 2 books, but he froze when he realized one of them was the diary he'd entrusted to Esther. After thinking for a second, shock ran through Rain's whole body. Whoever sent this knew who he really was. Out at the field's magic training center, Krista was doing time training. As the seconds ticked by, she fought fiercely against a few monsters. Her friend, who was timing her, said there were only 15 seconds left and asked if anything good had happened. Krista said nothing different had happened and asked why. Her friend said Krista seemed more upbeat than usual. With 5 seconds left, the girl asked if it had anything to do with Krista running into Rain. She wondered out loud if something had happened between them, which made Krista nervous. Annoyed, Krista said nothing happened, she was just irritated that she had to see his face every day, so she was blowing off steam and training. Her friend, looking thoughtful, said Krista wasn't fooling anyone with that act. She figured the rumors about Krista getting help from Rain during the exam were true. That surprised her, though, because the Rain she'd known back in childhood wasn't like this. In the main hall of the student dorm, that blonde guy from earlier walked down the corridor. Just then, a man who saw him passing welcomed him, calling him the C-grade loser. Everyone else ignored it, since they already knew what the guy was like. Hubert turned to him and told him to stop messing with him, or he might not wake up tomorrow. The man, Logan, told him to relax. Mocking him, he said when he heard someone got a C, he almost pissed himself laughing. He added that, on top of that, a girl named Krista got an S rank even with sandbags holding her back. Hubert just ignored him and quietly walked away. But as he was leaving, Logan brought up Rain. Asking if Rain was as cowardly as the rumors said, he said that even so, Rain was still better than Hubert. Without turning around, the blonde guy said that wasn't something a guy with muscles instead of a brain would say and, pissed off, asked if Logan was challenging him. Logan answered with a sneer that yeah, that's exactly what he was doing. They started glaring at each other, but a red-haired woman stopped them. Without even looking up from her book, she asked if they were done since there were other people there besides them. Her name was Lillian, a postgrad at the academy. Logan said she shouldn't worry, it was just a joke. He said he was planning a strategy to take down Krista and Rain, and asked if Lillian wanted in. Looking bored, Lillian said that was exactly why his magical progress was stuck. There's nothing to gain from bullying weaker people. Hubert cuts them off, saying he'll take care of Krista and Rain himself. Turning around, he says that if the guy butts in carelessly, he'll be the first one to go down. After shutting the door, the guy calls Logan an idiot. He throws a punch into the wall, wondering what Rain had actually done. Rain had worked under Professor Scalzi's supervision for 3 years, and he'd earned it. For someone who hadn't even gotten a single ranking, that shouldn't have been possible. Meanwhile, in his room, Rain was reading the book that had been sent to him. The first part was about Lynn's life. The second covered the magic and fighting styles he'd used. Rain couldn't make sense of it. Even if someone knew who he really was, he couldn't figure out why they hadn't reached out. Seeing it was already 11 p.m., he figured he should turn off the lights before the housemaster showed up. Just as he was about to flip the switch, Rain glanced at the book, remembering the kid who'd been following him. Suddenly, a Rudian jumps out from inside the book. Rain's shocked. It's Rudian magic from the old 8th rune school. For a second, he thinks it might be the one he made in his past life, but then he realizes it's at least twice the size. Still, the fact it had lasted 300 years was impressive. He wonders whose magic power this is and what it's for. For a moment, Rain remembers his old companions and the Rudian lands on his hand, telling him the progress on his unique magic research is at 37%. Then this huge window opens up in front of him. Rain's stunned, because it's his old research, the one meant to reach the sage level. There are the 12 original rooms he tested in battle 300 years ago. He'd assumed they all failed, but apparently they're at 37%. But then he thinks that shouldn't be possible for a 4-star spell, and wonders how Rudium could even track the progress of a 6-star one. He grins and lets it go, thinking that if this is real, then he wasn't wrong to stick to his path, and if he keeps going, he might finally reach the truth. That sudden burst of hope makes Rain completely forget about who sent the book. Putting on his robe, he decides it's time to start researching. But when he steps outside the dorms, he runs into heavy rain. Unlike the north, where it gets cold when it rains, the southern regions stayed warm even during rain, thanks to the mountain range's influence. Humming to himself, Rain walks through the rain. When he gets to a certain spot, he wonders if there really is a place where he can practice magic freely. A woman with greenish hair says that for that, a battlefield is perfect, and says she'll guide him. According to the dorm supervisor, the battlefield is a place to train powerful magic, with tons of space. Surrounded by high-level protective and restoration magic, you can cast spells as recklessly as you want without worrying. She says all he has to do to enter is touch it with his student ring. When he does, the wall of fire opens up like it's nothing. The system welcomes him, saying there are currently 30 empty rooms available. Saying goodbye, the supervisor tells him to feel free to use them. Rain says he'll take room 15. The request is approved, and in the blink of an eye, he's in an empty room. Rain asks for a durable target, and a monster rises up from the floor. Noticing it's a 2-star monster, Rain says that's not too bad. Opening the book, he decides to start with the U rune. But when he builds the room into a triangle shape, it weirdly falls apart. Looks like 1-star magic doesn't work. So he closes his hand, and when he opens it, Rain casts a spell this time with 3 triangular runes. Like he's doing alchemy or something, he smacks his fist into his palm, making a small explosion. It doesn't do any damage to the monster, which really frustrates him. Hubert, watching from far away, wonders what kind of trash magic that was. He figures it's 1-star magic, but the kid can't even use it right. The main thing about flame magic is that it's loud, but this was so quiet, it looked like it was still at the beginner stage. So Hubert turns away, thinking that rumor about Rain being Scalzi's assistant must have been fake. Our main guy kept using his magic non-stop until the monster started cracking, broke apart, and dropped to the ground. With a sigh, the boy said it had been a failure. The flame with Yu's signature trait slips into the target's body and melts it from the inside. That was the effect he was aiming for. But it took 30 seconds to do that to a 2-star golem. He wondered if the symbol needed to be more polished or if the problem was in the math theory. With a mocking grin, Rain figured he still had plenty of time to work it out. No matter how many times he messed up, Rain believed he could solve it. Keeping up his research, our protagonist ended up tweaking the symbol. Rudy had not only detected nearby magic, but also summarized and reported the research done that day seriously, an incredibly valuable helper. Then our boy noticed something. The research percentage had gotten up by 0.1%. He wondered if it was because of the theory, or because the rune had gotten more refined. He thought maybe there was some other meaning to training like that, but decided not to overthink it. He still had lots of time. Suddenly, a gust of wind came rushing toward him, making him curious. Rain realized it was Hubert, and figured he was just some newbie from Rohweenham Academy. Bats were swarming around the blonde guy. One of them lunged, but with a single punch, the monster got shattered into pieces. Moving fast, the guy kept attacking, and the rest of the monsters ended up the same way. That impressed Rain. He thought Hubert wasn't bad, someone worth keeping an eye on. But then our protagonist noticed something weird about the guy's movements. The scene cuts to the academy, where the professor explained the process needed to cast a spell. It was split into 3 steps. First, setting up the circle. Second, engraving the runes. And lastly, the mathematical calculation. Out of those, a lot of mages struggled with the 3rd step, because if there was a mistake in the calculation at any stage, it could cause a disaster. So, to keep them from turning into charcoal or getting blown to pieces, the Archmage Lin created a mathematical formula known as Lin's discriminant. He said he'd give them an example, and they had to solve it using Lin's discriminant. Since it might be too much for them, the teacher gave them 10 minutes and said the formula was made to be easy so there shouldn't be any idiots who couldn't do it. Starting the timer, the instructor told everyone to begin. Looking at the paper he'd been given, Rain wondered who had passed that formula along, because none of his classmates knew his formula, and besides, they could barely add or subtract, so there was no way they could have taught it. Still, one person came to mind, Tarina, a kid who followed him around claiming to be his disciple. Our protagonist figured maybe the kid had shared the formula as something Lin had invented, but he quickly tossed that idea out, since that had been over 300 years ago. Just then, Chris attacked him, and Rain asked if she was having trouble, telling her to show him. She said it was ridiculous for him to think that of her Krista Warden, the great genius. Suddenly, the professor stared at her with a deadly look, and she apologized, saying she wouldn't speak out of turn again. Rain asked what she wanted, and, stuttering a little, she handed him a box. Seeing it was a pretty fancy box, Rain asked what it was, and Krista said it was cookies. She said she'd made some with the time she had left over from magic training. Rain was about to ask why, but she cut him off and quickly said he was the one who'd said she owed him. Rain said, well, looks like she was more hardworking than she seemed, but when he opened the box, he found cookies that looked more like charcoal. Krista kept rambling, and, totally thrown off, Rain asked if she seriously called those cookies. Krista said yes, so Rain asked if she'd use mud instead of flour, which made her mad. The professor threw something at her, making her stop. Meanwhile, one student said Lin really was a genius for inventing a formula like that. Hearing all the praise from the students, Lin, now called Rain, felt like he was standing in a field of flowers. They said the mage might even be the reincarnation of an angel or a saint. Embarrassed, Rain begged them to stop in his head. Krista wondered why Rain's face had suddenly turned red. She wondered if he'd gotten shy over just a few cookies. And she thought that even though he always acted like he knew everything, deep down he had that side to him too. The teacher who come over says that for a primate who didn't even show up to class, she defended herself pretty well, and asks if she'd be interested in a special lesson. Saved by the bell, the chime rings, and the teacher tells them they should hand in their answers. While they're looking at the board with the available clubs, Krista asks which club Rain is planning to sign up for. Krista says she's going to join the Magic Volleyball Club, because descendants of the magic bloodline have to keep their dignity by playing magic volleyball. Our protagonist asks if she's serious, and she says that until recently, she didn't even know that. Raymond asks what volleyball has to do with dignity, and just as Krista is about to answer, he cuts her off to ask about some item. That makes her mad, and he basically ignores her and walks off, saying he's going to check out the other clubs. Delighton offers a bunch of clubs meant for exchange and competition between students. That's what they're set up for. Among them were the Combat Magic Club, a club specialized in fire attribute magic, a club for festive and decorative category magic. Clubs are made up of students with the same goals or motivations, and they get funding for activities as long as the supervising teacher approves it. That creates a good environment for everyone to focus on their own research. There were a bunch of interesting places Rain wanted to check out, but with Krista following him around, he couldn't concentrate. She keeps yelling, trying to convince him to join the Magic Volleyball Club, asking if Rain's dad hadn't mentioned that people from the magic bloodline were supposed to sign up. Rain says even if that's true, it's not a problem. Krista asks why, and Rain explains that his dad isn't going to interfere with his decision. Krista's friend says that can't be true, because the volleyball club is a legit club, and he should join to honor the magic bloodline. Rain says it's not mandatory and that the Magic Sculpture Club caught his eye more. Plus, there was also the local Magic Development Club. Thinking back, Rain remembers how in the past people were fighting just to survive, but the world became peaceful, and little by little, everyone was able to do what they actually liked. Esther used to tell him that when he grew up, the world would definitely become a prosperous place, so she hoped Lin would be able to protect us lives. Seeing Rain lost in thought, Gertrude calls out to him, asking if he's even listening. All of a sudden, Rain starts walking without saying anything. When I ask where he's going, he says he's going to stop by the local Magic Development Club. That leaves Gertrude confused, wondering if Rain doesn't know that magic volleyball is basically an essential part of high-class mage social gatherings. With a sigh, she says it looks like the glory of the Ludwig family who competed with the Page family for over 100 years is going to end with Lord Rain. Then she realizes something. If the Page family's eldest daughter disappeared after a certain incident, and now the Ludwig family fell too. With this intense, almost glowing hostility, she says that if that happens, it'd be the perfect time for a new era led by Krista. But when she turns around to look for the girl, Gertrude notices she's not there anymore. In disbelief, she wonders if Krista maybe followed Rain. And sure enough, just like Gertrude suspected, Krista is following Rain, using the excuse that she's curious about the local magic development club. They finally get there, and when Rain is about to open the door, he hears an argument coming from inside. One guy says he can't accept the conditions being proposed, the other tries to justify it with the whole the strong take everything idea, according to club rules. The arrogant guy is Logan, with his usual laid-back expression, telling the other kid to hand over the room. Seeing what's going on, Rain asks who that guy is. Krista asks how he doesn't know and explains it's Logan, a junior from Chihak Academy. Rain repeats the school's name like a question. With a sigh, she says it's a school focused on martial arts. Logan asks if the kid really wants to settle this with a duel, basically taunting him, asking if he even has the guts to duel him. Putting the kid's club down, Logan says a club like that won't be missed like, who even cares about a local development club anyway. Watching like a nosy neighbor, Krista says this kind of thing happens a lot, because clubs need rooms to run their activities. And if you want to start a club when there aren't any rooms available, you have to take a room from another club. Rain asks if, this was settled through a magic duel, which the girl confirms, saying it was a clear and efficient method. Changing the subject, the girl kind of teasing asks if he isn't going to sign up for the club, and Rain says he doesn't like annoying stuff. Back to the conversation between the two guys in the club room. The guy says that studying math or making academic breakthroughs isn't the only reason magic exists. Logan asks what the reason would be, and the guy says, from the bottom of his heart, that academic achievements pushed magic forward. But agriculture and disaster relief are areas where magic hasn't really been used much. He says that if they could find a way to use magic there, maybe they could easily solve problems like poverty. Logan fires back, saying they definitely can't solve that with magic alone. Pointing at him, the nerd says that club was created by upperclassmen to make that happen, and that, thinking about the people suffering right now, he can't hand the club over to Logan. Hearing that, Logan bursts out laughing and asks if the kid is serious, saying that if it were really possible, the archmages would have done it already. Grabbing him by the shirt, Logan asks what the kid who can't even hold onto a club against a freshman thinks he's going to do. With a smug laugh, he asks if those so-called upperclassmen have gotten any results this whole time. That leaves the kid stunned, not knowing what to say. Then Logan keeps going, asking if he really believes in that prophetic research. He says that if the guy won't even dare to face him, then he must think it's no big deal and that's annoying. So he asks what the kid thinks about, instead of helping someone he doesn't even know, helping the person right in front of him. Still being held by the shirt, the kid says he can't do that. Logan comments that the kid can barely even keep his eyes open because he's so scared. Asking if the kid is even awake, Logan says there's nothing left to do except help him open his eyes. He's about to slam him into the ground, but Rain stops him using an electric spell to make him let go of the guy. Building up his aura, the protagonist asks if Logan wouldn't rather have a magic duel with him instead of picking on that kid. Logan looks at Rain, wondering who he is. Noticing that, Rain says he just joined the club as a new member. After a long study session, the progress rate had gone up from 37.1% to 37.9%. In a rhetorical tone, Rain wonders if magic can really do everything. It's not that anything is possible, there are still things magic can't do. But if it could create an oasis right in the middle of the desert, it could help travelers looking for water. Then he remembers Esther, who on one of her trips asked him to create some spells that anyone could use easily, to help people in trouble and make life easier. Logan stares at the protagonist, who just showed up out of nowhere, with hatred. Then he quickly changes his expression and says, "Oh, so you're a new member." He notices something interesting. Behind Rain is Krista, and the boy's red eyes aren't unfamiliar. Logan steps closer, saying the kid said something stupid and then immediately corrects himself, saying he has a bad habit of thinking out loud. Looking at the kid, he says he was actually on his way to greet him, but asks if he really mentioned a magic duel. In an arrogant tone, he asks if he heard that right. Calmly, the protagonist says yes, that's exactly what Logan understood. So Logan says that if he's that eater, maybe he should give him a match. Laughing, Logan asks if Rain seriously thinks he can beat him. Throwing it back at him, Rain asks if he's scared. If so, Rain can give him an advantage by not using any magic during the fight, and if that's still not enough, Rain says he'll only use 3 spells developed by that club. That confuses Logan, who asks if he's serious. Confidently, Rain says Logan's basically saying he won't lose either way. Hearing that, Logan says this isn't just a failure, it's stupidity. He puts a hand over his mouth, saying he misspoke again, then asks if Rain knows it takes 3 days before a new member can be approved. So, at that point, it was basically just a personal challenge. Noticing Logan was up to something, Rain tells him to just get to the point. Turning to the club leader, Logan says that if Rain won, he'd give up that room, and if anyone showed up to mess with them, he'd kick them out himself. But if Logan won, the kid would have to submit a form to drop out of school. Logan laughed, saying that for some reason, ever since he'd met him, he felt this huge, impossible to cross barrier. Just then, Krista, who'd been listening from outside, opens the door and asks if Logan is kidding, because the deal wasn't fair at all. Already sick of her, Logan tells the busybodies to shut up. Agreeing with him, Rain tells Krista not to get involved. She asks if he even understands what's really going on there. Staring Logan down, Rain says he doesn't need to because he's going to win. Rain tells Logan he can pick the date and time, he'll be ready whenever. Laughing, Logan says that since Rating's so confident, he'll get a teacher to act as judge. And since there's no need to drag it out, he says the duel will be that same day at 6, in the Dragon Blood Arena. Walking past Krista, who's standing by the door totally stunned, Logan says he'll be waiting for the kid. As he walked through the school, Logan commented that this time he caught something big, and the principal and the elders would be pretty pleased. He figured that day was going to be amazing. Calling out to Rain, Krista asks if he'd forgotten his place there, getting himself into a magic duel. Opening a book, Rain answers dismissively that he's a university freshman. In a serious tone, she tells him to stop messing around. Rain just ignores her and grabs a few more books. Seeing that, she turns away, saying he can do whatever he wants and that she's an idiot for worrying about him. Watching her leave, Rain wonders why Krista is so mad. Standing up, the club leader says it makes no sense. Rain was the one who did it. People from magical bloodlines don't get into duels. Then Rain notices something. The club leader had a dragon Rain with open wings, which was weird considering he was only a second year. Putting that aside, Rain asks why he says that. The leader explains it's because there's way more to lose than to gain, and admits he feels more confused than grateful, asking why Rain helped him. Rain says he didn't mean to help him, but he did because of a promise. The guy looks confused, but says he's grateful anyway. Still, he says it feels like Rain is underestimating Logan. Hearing that, Rain asks if Logan is really that impressive. The guide explains that Logan is basically like a mage king. He has a big advantage against regular mages and specializes in long-range magic. On top of that, he's been in a bunch of duels and his win rate is over 90%. Sitting down, the nerd says Rain got himself into a reckless situation, all because he spoke without thinking. He says maybe he overdid it arguing with Logan, since honestly, it wasn't even that big of a club. Cleaning his glasses, he says he was born out in the countryside, and the villagers pooled their savings so he could pay tuition. So he wanted to pay them back somehow, to make the village a better place to live. That's why he joined the club and started researching magic. But things didn't go the way he planned, and the anxiety just kept getting worse over time. He clung to it for personal reasons, and in the end, he got nothing. He asks if that doesn't sound pathetic, and says it feels like it's God's will that he give up. Laughing nervously, the leader stands up and says he'll be the only one taking part in this duel. Rain cuts him off and, with a serious look, asks what's pathetic about any of that. Pulling a book from the shelf, Rain says he's the one who accepted the magic duel, and asks if he can borrow a few books about magic. As he leaves the club room, he says he'll bring them back soon. The guy tries to stop him, and that's when Rain asks if he knows why Archmage Lin started studying magic. Confused, the leader asks why, and Rain says it was to survive. Then he says everyone starts studying magic for some personal reason. Out in the university hallways, everyone was whispering when they saw Rain. Realizing the rumor had already spread, he thinks it's turning into something way bigger than he expected. Then he hears someone calling out to him, saying they'd finally found him. When he turns around, Rain sees it's Ellen. She's sweaty and clearly exhausted, and she asks if he's okay. With no hostility at all, the boy greets her. The next second, before he can even say anything, she lunges at him and locks him in an arm hold. She says she can barely sleep because of him. Admitting she knows about the duel, she asks if she heard wrong. Rain then admits the rumor is true. That drives her crazy in a laughing fit. She says her adorable nephew has caused a whole scene and that she needs a drink. Rain yells that his head's going to explode if she keeps squeezing. She lets him go and says getting hit by Logan would hurt way more, and that he's being dramatic. Then she sighs, and Rain slow as always asks if she was worried about him. She whips around and yells, asking if she looks like some pathetic aunt who worries and goes around checking on a guy like him, telling him not to get the wrong idea. Flicking him on the forehead a few times, she says he'll only learn after Logan gives him a proper beating. Aelin turns to leave, and Rain apologizes, saying he didn't realize it was something he wasn't supposed to do. Still, he promises he won't bring shame to the family. His aunt says it's already become a matter of family honor, and because of what he did, worst case, he could get kicked out. But it's fine because she's actually mad at the people who laughed at him like he was useless. Turning back with a proud look, she says that since Rain started this, he better stomp that guy when the time comes, because the Ludwig family name is on his shoulders, so he needs to make sure nobody even thinks they can catch up to him. At the arena, the two of them stare each other down. Rain remembers his aunt's words and thinks that was his plan from the start anyway. At school, everyone runs to watch the fight. After all, a useless, noble, and the chain-hack brute were going head-to-head. A male teacher watches the duel, and a female teacher asks who he's rooting for. Logan from her faction, or Rain, his student. The teacher says status, bloodline, or education don't matter to him at all. He's just going to support whoever's stronger. That gets a genuine laugh out of her. She says she expected nothing less from him. The duel's referee introduces himself as Theon. Since the magic duel is officially sanctioned by the school, the loser has to follow whatever conditions the winner sets, according to academy rules. After saying that, he tells both of them to step forward. With all the swagger in the world, Logan throws his cape aside and strides up. Rain watches him with pure disdain. People comment that Logan clearly came prepared, but they wonder if it isn't overkill for some washed-up noble. Krista is watching the fight when she jumps as Gertrude finds her. Gertrude says, so this is where she ended up. Nervous, Krista tries to make it clear she's not worried, she just came to enjoy watching Rain get beaten up. Smiling, Gertrude says she knows. Somewhere else in the stands, the teacher thinks about how apprentices take time to cast spells. So mages who can rush in and fight up close are a real threat. She wonders how the boy is going to deal with that. Suddenly, both the teacher and all the students watching are shocked because Rain pulls a broom out from under his cloak. Logan says he thought it was some kind of wooden staff, but no, it's a broom. Everyone starts laughing at him, asking if he came there to sweep the floor. Krista, seeing it, covers her face in disappointment. The referee asks what that is, and Rain says he borrowed it from the library. Luckily, cleaning had just finished. All smug, Logan asks if the kid is begging for mercy. Just a few hours ago, he was acting all confident, and now he's showing up with a broom. The musclehead mage says Rain should just stop now, so he doesn't embarrass himself even more. Mocking him, Rain asks Logan since when mages started winning with words. Furious, Logan steps in even closer until the referee stops him, saying he's too close. The judge says he'll confirm the terms before the duel starts. If Logan loses, he'll have to work as a guard for the local development club until graduation. If Rain loses, he has to leave Delayton. The judge asks if they both accept, since there shouldn't be any objections after the ruling. At the same time, both of them confirm they agree. Activating a spell, Theon says that in that case, they should step back, because the duel will start in 10 seconds. The spell starts a countdown. Everyone rushes over to watch the fight that's about to begin. Ellen's assistant asks if she doesn't need to watch, saying she can handle the rest of the work on her own, but Ellen says she's not going. Hearing that, the girl says Ellen seems weirdly calm, and Ellen, annoyed, asks if she's saying she can't stay calm. Nervous, the assistant says that's not what she meant. Looking out the window, Ellen smiles, thinking maybe Rain is the vessel of a sage. Then she says there's no need to watch, because the outcome has already been decided. Finally, the timer hits 0, and the judge gives the order to begin. And like a total jerk, Logan rips off the bandages, still covering him, and tells Rain to get a good look because once he leaves the school, he'll never get another chance to see him. Activating the Chehak school's secret technique, his body strengthens and gets covered in lines. On the left side of his chest, there's a rune. Hubert, watching, admires how fast he activated it because one small mistake could break bones or rupture organs. The teacher thinks it's no surprise the boy is considered one of the school's top talents. Holding his broom, Rain stays calm. And with veins bulging on his forehead, Logan declares he'll end this in 10 seconds. Our protagonist sighs, and the guy charges at him. Everyone's eyes go wide, but Rain doesn't move. Right before hitting Rain, Logan says that even if the kid could move, the result wouldn't change, because the strengthening spell creates a magic barrier on the surface of the body for defense, and it explodes at the point of impact to deal damage. There's no stopping it. The only thing left is to crush the kid. But the moment Logan's about to land the blow, his arm gets knocked back by the spin of Rain's broom. Logan panics. There's no time to think, because the next second he gets hit by another spinning strike from the kid. The blow sends Logan flying through the air, and everyone's stunned. The professor wonders if that was the Osirius school's staff technique. 300 years ago, that technique raised Osirius into one of the 8 major schools, a technique created by the great mage Lin. Even mages needed to be able to fight up close, and rumors said the mage developed that technique with help from the heroine Esther. The professor is dying to know how the Ludwig family's successor learned it. At that moment, the blonde teacher notices something that shocks her. The broom the kid used didn't even break. If he hit a reinforced body with a clean broom, the handle shoe shattered. She thinks maybe it was magic because seriously, who is this kid? Rain sighs and the crowd goes wild, talking about how Logan got launched. Logan tries to get up and suddenly spits blood. He can't believe it. His strengthening getting wrecked by a broom held by some useless noble. Our protagonist looks down at him, asking if he didn't say he'd end it in 10 seconds. Since it's not fun beating up a promising junior, Rain says he'll finish it in 6 seconds. Taking a fighting stance, the kid says he's ready and Logan should come at him with everything. Pissed off, Logan gets up and stomps, cracking part of the arena and throwing Rain off balance a bit. Then he kicks up a few rocks and sends them flying, but Rain easily blocks them with the broom. But when he looks up again, our protagonist has lost sight of Logan. Looking behind him, Rain activates a spell on the broom, blocking an attack coming from his back. What he doesn't expect is that Logan is above him, lining up a kick. Logan drops down and nails Rain with a flying kick. A cloud of dust bursts up, making the club leader worry. But inside the haze, we see Logan sinking into mud. The man was wondering what had happened out there when he heard Rain's voice, saying that was a 1-star spell used for plowing fields. When Logan turned around, he saw the kid standing on a pile of rocks, explaining that the spell could create a temporary dam during floods. Smiling, our protagonist asked if that didn't seem pretty useful. In the crowd, some people looked worried or shocked, while others seemed genuinely excited about the spells. The teacher, thinking to himself, noted that staying up on a platform, keeping a good view and some distance, was perfect for shutting down Logan's ability. To him, Rain had seen Logan's attack coming, turn the ground into mud, and trap Logan's feet. Everyone thought the fight was basically over, since Rain clearly had the upper hand. But then, from the top of the platform, our protagonist threw the broom he'd been using as a weapon, and everyone just froze in disbelief. That move even startled Logan, who looked up, totally confused. Krista yelled at the kid, asking what he thought he was doing, saying he should just use a long-range spell and end it already. At that moment, Logan, still stuck in the mud, started gathering his strength. And as the broom fell, the guy launched himself like a rocket, smashed it, and charged at Rain with a punch. But right as he was about to hit Rain, Logan got stopped by huge tree roots our protagonist summoned. Everyone's jaw dropped, because that spell could basically bring dead plants back to life. That's when Logan realized why the kid had thrown the broom. Breaking part of the branch that was holding Logan, Rain said that, like he promised, he'd only used 3 spells, and he asked if, in that case, they should just end this. Realizing he was about to lose, Logan started cursing him out, thinking there was no way he could allow himself to lose in such a humiliating way. He began twisting and struggling, trying to break free. Seeing that, our protagonist wondered if he'd put in too much magical power, but then he said maybe it was just sticky because it was a vine and that, considering plant traits and how easy it was to control, it still needed improvements. Rain commented that Logan looked like he was in pain. Still, he told him not to worry, he'd be more comfortable soon enough. Holding the branch, our protagonist pretended he was going to jab Logan in the eye. But at the last second, he swerved, turned away, and tossed the branch aside. Frustrated, Logan demanded to know what he was doing, since he'd said he was going to finish this. And before he could keep complaining, Rain said the battle was already over. Since Logan had lost, he should just shut up. Rain also said Logan now understood how much it hurt to get hit, so from now on, he should stop doing bad things. Then our protagonist undid the platform, and Logan, still trapped, realized that for the first time, someone had actually shown him mercy. Watching the magic fade, Rain said it had lasted a long time, and that spell seemed like it had plenty of practical uses. Bored, our protagonist remembered he still had to officially finish the duel after all. One side had to surrender or completely collapse. And as Logan fell, Rain hit him with a wind spell. With his fingers still smoking, the kid said the match had already been decided earlier, so that shouldn't count as an attack. Then Rain looked at the judge, waiting for the announcement. Grabbing his radio, the man announced the winner was Rain, from the Ludwig family. As soon as the winner was announced, the crowd started shouting. Krista, who'd been worried up until then, looked happy and relieved. Looking back, Rain noticed someone coming toward him, leaning against the wall. It was the club leader, thanking Rain for everything and saying he didn't even know how to repay that kind of kindness. Our protagonist asked what kindness he meant, and the kid tried to say something, but Rain cut him off, saying that even if they weren't perfect, he could feel the leader's determination in every spell he'd used. And he said, firmly, that the upperclassman's efforts hadn't been for nothing. Realizing he'd said more than he probably should have, Rain apologized and asked if he could request something. Smiling, our protagonist asked the guy to keep creating spells for local development enough that Rain wouldn't be needed. He said he believed the kid could handle it. And while the club leader cried happy tears, Rain left the arena, wondering what Esther would have said in that situation. But he figured he should stop thinking about it after all. He wasn't Esther. Even so, Rain wondered if he'd managed to keep at least a little dignity. That night, in the dorm, Logan woke up to the sound of people talking about the fight. They couldn't believe the result. After all, it's not every day some useless noble beats a genius like Logan. When he gets up, the guy ends up with a massive headache. The professor, standing next to his bed, asks how Logan's feeling after dragging the school's name through the mud. Breaking out in a cold sweat, the kid tries to come up with an excuse, calling the professor Big Brother. Grinding his teeth, the professor says that here, he should call him Professor. That freaks the kid out, and he apologizes right away. With a sigh, the professor says Logan should take a break. Looking scared, the kid says if he did that, his brother would probably get beaten up by the elders. Turning away, the professor says Logan should stop pretending to be a genius, asking if he really thinks he's special just because people treat him like he's elite. With a shaky voice and his head down, the kid says no. Then the professor asks what the boy knows about Scalzi Ludwig. He explains that the Rivendell students said Rain was Scalzi's assistant for 3 years, leaving the kid speechless. The professor goes on, saying that if heartless Scalzi kept him around for 3 years, then Rain's skills were the real deal. Furious, Logan couldn't accept the oldest son of a family being like that, and ignoring everything his brother tells him, he refuses to accept it, swearing he'll take the kid down the next time they fight. Hearing that, the professor asks if he's stupid or something, saying it looks like the kid's stubbornness didn't change even after getting his ass kicked. He asks what Logan even sees in the boy to call him a disgrace. Logan's the one who got beaten and then spared in the end. Still, if that's the only conclusion Logan can come to, his brother says he can do whatever he wants. As he leaves the room, the professor reminds him to make sure he follows through on the bet. Now alone, Logan convinces himself he wasn't intimidated by his brother and that he didn't argue out of respect. Rewinding a bit, 15 minutes before the magic duel with Logan, Rain was into Layton's Central Library, the biggest library in the Empire. He thought it was weird that Lynn's biography and diaries had been handed to him. He asked the secretary where he should go to find books like the ones he has. And the next moment, she hands him 2 books, one about the life and achievements of the archer Kais, and another about the fire dragon priestess, Friede. Looking at the books, he remembers the bet he made with the priestess. With a smug smile, she said they should bet on whose biography would be thicker. But Lynn looked at her like she was ridiculous, asking why he should care about a ranking made by someone he didn't even know. The mage tries to get under his skin, asking if he's scared because the bet is against the legendary priestess Friede. Like a kid, he falls for it and accepts, saying the outcome was obvious anyway. Esther, who is training with a stone stuck on the tip of her sword, turns around and says that in that case, she's betting on Lynn. Friede asks why she always bets on the boy, and Esther says it's the obvious choice. Walking up to Esther, Lynn asks what the real reason is, and with a smile, she says it's for a bunch of reasons. Suspicious. Our protagonist asks why she's dodging the question. So she finally answers, because of her bloodline, her time is really limited, and she won't live long. Also, Kais was the oldest in the group, so he'd probably be next, and Free wasn't that different either. But Lynn was young, so she said that out of all of them, he'd be the one who'd live the longest. And that's why his biography would end up being the thickest. So even if they didn't know what the future would bring, she hoped that one day they'd get to see Lynn's biography. With the book in his hands, the boy thinks about how ironic it is because he was the first one to die. In his head, he congratulates the priestess on winning. Putting his companions' biographies side by side, our protagonist realizes Kais's was the thickest of them all. Reading the archer's book, Rain is surprised after founding an archery school and training a bunch of disciples. The man got married and had descendants. Smiling, the boy thinks to himself that his friends seem to have lived a happy life. Going to check the biography of the fire dragon priestess, Friede, Rain starts noticing something weird. There were no records after the year 1168. It said she'd led the Republic for a long time as a priestess, but after that, nobody knew where she went. She only showed up again in the year 1200, when the Witch Association officially declared her dead. But that bugs Rain, because for someone who loved being the center of attention, dying quietly like that just didn't fit. Still, he thinks maybe it could happen, people change, right? He snaps the book shut, deciding there's no way. He knew Friede better than anyone, and that kind of ending was impossible for her, so something must have happened. All of a sudden, an idea hits him, and he wonders if maybe she disappeared because of someone else's actions. A shaman who saved the world vanishing in secret, without anyone noticing. Stressed out, he crumples a few pages and thinks it might be better to look for books from the Republic. Right then, a girl says that if he's looking for something about Esther's group, he should read that book, and she hands him the biography. He thanks her, happy, thinking it's a biography about Esther. But when he takes it, he realizes it's about the Ash Shaman, Terena, his disciple. That sends him drifting off into his thoughts until the girl who gave him the book asks what's wrong. He says it's nothing, and thanks her for the recommendation. As he flips through the biography, Rain wonders when that mischievous girl had become a shaman. I mean, a shaman who commands spirits is one of the highest ranks among witches. It's not something just anyone can become. So he starts thinking maybe she was the one who succeeded Friede. After reading for a while, he can't stop wondering how someone could live that long. It's hard to know whether to believe it or not, and with what he'd learned about Freed, Rain thinks he might need to find a book from the Republic. Just then, he hears the signal that the duel is about to start. He's still debating whether he should go, but since he already talked all that big talk, he figures he has to. Standing up, he asks the girl if she can hold on to that book for a bit. She says it'd be hard to keep it if someone requested it, she'd have to hand it over. So Rain says he'll be back in 15 minutes. After finishing the magic duel against Logan, Rain rushes back to the library and notices the librarian looks anxious, like she's searching for something. Looking at Rain, she asks if he happened to take the book earlier, which he denies. Rain asks if it disappeared, and Karen confirms it, saying that when she finished her tasks and came back, the book was already gone. Rain asks if maybe someone else took it, but the librarian says no. If an unregistered book was removed, the alarm would go off. Rain can't figure out how that could have happened in such a short time. Seeing how worried Karen looks, he doesn't think she's lying. Karen apologizes because she'd promised she'd keep the book safe. Rain tells her it's fine, they can just buy a new one, and she should place the order as if he'd lost it. She tries to refuse, but after Rain insists a lot, she finally agrees. She says she's surprised someone like him even exists, and thanks him. In his room, Rain stares at the ceiling, thinking that lately people have been thanking him a lot. But even if it's kind of a waste of time, for some reason he doesn't feel bad about it. He wonders if it's because his body changed, or because he's been living such a peaceful life. Either way, he knows he has to figure out what to do about these incidents. Because there are too many weird points, like the diary he trusted to Esther somehow ending up back with him. And on top of that, right when he started digging into his companion's past, Tarina's chronicle disappeared. He wonders if it was her, but then thinks that's impossible because she's already passed on, and everyone he'd known back when he was still Lin was dead. Not knowing who is behind all of this is really messing with him. Picking up the book again, he realizes strangely his progress has increased. Rain wonders why, since all he did that day was beat someone using magic. Then it clicks, and he realizes he can increase his progress by using magic against other people. And that means the door to the truth has to be opened through violence. But the guy's excitement dies down, and he starts thinking something about this can't be right. Our main character figures that even if power can rule the world, it didn't seem like it was something that worked through brute force alone. Still, when he used magic on a non-living target, it went up by 0.1%, but when he used it against Logan, it jumped by 0.8%. Thinking it over, he decides it's definitely worth testing. The problem is, using magic on living people inside the school would be a big issue. So he starts thinking maybe he should become an adventurer. Rain points out that either way, he's gonna need money to buy the books, so it would help. The next day, our protagonist, Chad, is surrounded by girls fighting for his attention. Grumpy as always, Rain says he's not interested in getting close to them and asks if they can go somewhere else. But they just assume he's joking and start laughing. Two guys comment that, apparently, Rain is doing pretty well with the girls, and that flirting like that first thing in the morning is pretty classy. Hearing that, he's just sick of all of it. Then Krista shows up, draws all the girls' attention, and tells them to make room. And like magic, they all scatter, and she can finally sit down. Whispering in Rain's ear, Gertrude says maybe his real nickname should be Lady Killer, giving him a mischievous grin before walking off. Rain tries to talk to Krista, but she looks kind of mad and tells him not to talk to her. Rain asks why, and she repeats herself, asking if she didn't tell him to stop bothering her. Giving up on fixing it, he says he won't bother her anymore. In his head, he wonders if it's because of the magic duel. Closing her book, she says she's not exactly mad, because honestly, it was pretty satisfying to watch. What really annoys her, though, is that he hid his power and acted weak when he was actually strong. And if someone's strong, he should walk around with pride since he beat Logan and even beat her. Plus, thanks to what he did, she can finally step on him without people saying she's bullying the weak. Pointing at Rain, she tells him to get ready, declaring that next time she's going to crush him until he turns to dust. At that moment, everyone in the classroom notices what Chris is doing and starts whispering that it looks like the top student and Rain are having a showdown. They stare each other down, and our protagonist asks if she's really going to stay standing, because if she keeps that up, she'll lose points in the teacher's class. She agrees, sits down, and thanks him for the heads up. Everyone in the room notices how polite Krista is. Meanwhile, Gertrude thinks that if Krista spent all night practicing her declaration of war, she should at least do it properly. That weekend, at the central library, the librarian Karen tells Rain there's been a problem. That leaves him a little confused, wondering what happened. Then she says all the books related to Tarina are out of stock. When he asks why, she says she's not totally sure, but the interrogation unit of the Children of Gold sect put them on the censorship list. So he asks if that means the shaman was declared a heretic, and Karen confirms it. Rain is confused, because it's weird for someone to be labeled a heretic after they're already dead. He asks if Karen read the book, and she says yes because it's required reading for any librarian who takes the job seriously. After all, it's about Archmage Lin and Freedy's disciple, and it's full of stories. Rain is stunned, wondering if they're even talking about the same person, and asks if there was anything weird in the book about dark magic. She says she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, and that it reads like a biography, and if there were anything like that, censorship would have filtered it out. Hearing that, Rain thinks it just raises even more questions. With a sigh, he says that in that case, he'll have to go to the black market, which leaves her confused about what he's planning. He explains that you can find anything on the black market from heretical books to magical tools corroded by the abyss, so it should be easy to find books about Tarina. Karen says she's worried about how expensive that'll be since something rare, like a censored item, probably costs a lot. Rain thinks that, if that's the issue, it'd be risky to have his family bankroll a heretical book. The librarian says a book like that should cost, on average, 3 gold coins, something she could never afford on her salary. So Rain realizes that, first of all, he needs to scrape together some money. He starts wondering if he should sell spells on the street or work as a magic instructor. But both options pay way too little for the time they take. In moments like that, Rain thinks the only way out is a high-risk plan with a big payoff. And right then, the biggest gamble he could make was earning money by risking his own life. Turning quickly toward the exit, Rain thanks her, saying she'd been a huge help. That makes the girl curious, and she asks where he's going. Rain says there's something he wants to try. He admits he's planning to become an adventurer, so he can make some money while he's stuck in this situation. Worried about him, Karen says it would be disgraceful for a lord from a well-known family, and that if he just gave her a little more time, she'd figure something out. Rain says it's the fastest way to get the money. Sad that she can't stop him, she admits she feels ashamed. The next morning, a strange man is asking about the name Rain Ludwig, which is on the list, saying he borrowed Turina's biography. Since first semester students aren't allowed to borrow books, he asks who approved it. Then the other librarian says Karen was the one responsible. When he asks where Karen is, she says it's her day off. So the man asks if, since she's new, maybe she never received the borrowing rules, something the librarian says is possible. Another girl working there suggests maybe Karen wrote down the wrong name, because she could have mixed up Rain's name with Elin's. She says Karen's handwriting is so messy you can't even tell if it says Ellen or Rain. And since everyone's been talking about Rain lately, Karen might have gotten confused and written it wrong. Plus, Karen's been seen having secret meetings with the boy lately, and people make mistakes when they're in love. Hearing that, the man says that if that's the case, then it's fine, and he just needs to change the borrower's name to Elin after the meeting. In the past, when people thought of adventuring, they immediately pictured brutal work, risking your life for money, rough people in taverns, that kind of thing. But now they seem more like mercenaries who take out monsters. And if you're top tier, you're treated almost like a hero. Knowing that, Rain thinks the world really has changed. When he enters the Adventurers Guild, he runs into some adventurers talking about trouble with spiders and rats and how high the reward is. He keeps walking, keeping that in mind. At the counter, the receptionist asks what he wants. Rain says he'd like to register as an adventurer. Judging by his uniform, she realizes he's a Delayton student and asks if he has a student ID or some kind of document. When he hands it over, he asks how long registration takes, and she says for Delayton students, it takes less than 10 minutes. Looking closely at his ID, she notices his last name and remembers it's a powerful, noble family. So she wonders why someone like him is registering as an adventurer. Rain asks if he needs to do anything else, and she hands him a sheet of paper, asking him to fill out the form and sign on the last line. He asks why, and she says it's a special clause for nobles. It states that the guild isn't responsible for any problems that happen because of adventurer work, and that means. Rain finishes her sentence, asking if that means some people tried to blame the guild. The receptionist says she's heard it happen about 100 years ago, and that's why the clause was created. Handing him an iron tag, she tells Rain his registration is complete. She explains it's his adventurer badge, and his current rank is iron. The next ranks go from bronze to diamond, and any previous combat experience or skills from before becoming an adventurer would be reflected in your adventurer rank. That helps confirm whether you're capable of completing missions. Just as she's about to explain that he hasn't taken the ranking exam, the boy says he already gets the basics and starts to leave. She tries to stop him, saying there's still useful info, but he thanks her and says that's enough for now. So, the receptionist tells him to take care of himself, and that as his rank went up, the level of missions he'd be able to take would go up too. Now that he's officially registered as an adventurer, Rain thinks he can finally start collecting rewards for monster exterminations and enter dangerous areas. Right now, he only has 44 silver coins, so he decides to start by hunting some rat spiders. Since they're worth 2 silver coins per one defeated, he figures they must be pretty weak. In that case, the only option he has is to catch a whole bunch of them. Leaving the guild, he reaches a mountainous area with a Japanese-style gate. Rain comments that this place had changed a lot too. In the middle of the city, there's a crowd gathered around a man who supposedly sells life-extending potions. As he walks, the boy thinks that the dragons must have died, and that's why the monsters have gone out of control. As Rain is leaving, the man calls out to him, asking him to take a potion since there are lots of monsters past that point, but the boy refuses. After walking a bit more, he reaches a staircase and realizes the steps leading to the fire dragon shrine are still there. Looking at the stairs, he remembers the time he came there with his companions. To himself, he says the shaman's hometown is safe. Stretching, he says the shaman should watch closely as he wipes out all the pests in that land. Just then, a woman with long greenish hair shows up and, getting Rain's attention, asks if he's a mage. She tells him to stop hiding because he can't fool her, creating this weird vibe in the air. Rain replies that he's not hiding. He asks if it isn't obvious he's a mage because of his uniform. Embarrassed, she tells him to just drop it. She asks him to join her party since they need a mage. Rain's surprised to hear she has a party, and she starts introducing the members. Pointing to a huge man standing behind Rain, she says that's Bart, a super reliable silver rank vanguard. Rain asks if she's kidding, because no matter how he looks at him, that guy doesn't seem human. Hearing that, the woman says he's being rude, and that despite his looks, Bart is actually a softie. Then she introduces Sammy, the party's apprentice priest, who gives off this calm kid vibe and says it's nice to meet him. Finally, the girl introduces herself as Rem, a genius archer. And, striking a pose straight out of Team Rocket, she declares they're going to do their best. Rain asks if they're seriously trying to recruit adventurers looking like some kind of criminal gang. Rem asks who he's calling a criminal, and he says they look like a human trafficking group trying to kidnap people. At that moment, Bart, looking angry, says that if Rain wants a fight, he can bring it, scaring the boy. But then something unexpected happens. The giant warrior who seemed unshakable starts crying. Rem tries to calm him down, saying this isn't the first time they'd been misunderstood. Scratching his head, Rain asks why they'd want someone iron rank like him. Confused by the question, Rem explains that ranks don't mean anything to them, they can judge people just by looking. With a bright smile, she says he looks pretty strong. That attitude reminds Rain of his old companion, Esther. She also says Bart didn't want Rain going alone down a mountain path full of monsters. Sammy adds that young students often get into accidents trying to make money in that area. The group says they don't want to force him into anything and tells him to be careful if he'd rather go alone. After thinking for a bit, Rain thanks them for the advice, but leaves, saying he prefers to work solo. Sighing, the party leader says it's a shame, but there's nothing they can do. Still, she says he'll be fine, telling Bart not to worry so much. As Rain walks away, Rem says they should start hunting the rat spiders, since she's already found their habitat. Just then, someone taps her on the shoulder, cutting her off. It's Rain sweating and introducing himself. He says he's available to join the party, and with that group, Rain heads out to exterminate the rat spiders. Somewhere else, we see the spiders feeding. In the middle of the forest, a rat spider is chewing on tree branches. Then he hears something. It's Rain's group, wondering if rat spiders even really exist, since they haven't seen any sight of them around there. Bart asked if it'd be okay with the kid if they split the profits evenly, and the kid said that sounded fair. They asked if this was Rain's first adventure and whether he knew what those rat things were like. The kid said no and asked if they could explain. That's when the cleric explained that rat spiders were creatures with a rat's head and a spider's body, and their colony was made up of the queen, her soldiers, and the workers. The workers were omnivores and ate trees, while the soldiers attacked humans. Hearing that, Rain asked about the queen. The young priest said it wouldn't be necessary, because they weren't going after her this time. They were only going to take out the soldiers, and the queen, who rarely came above ground, would be left alone. That was the basic plan. Rain asked why they were leaving the queen alone, and if it wouldn't be better to wipe out all the monsters at once. Bart said the queen wasn't even close to being as big a threat as the soldiers. If they tried to capture the queen, it'd take a whole operation that would cost a ton of money, so they started with the soldiers, since those were the ones messing up everyday life. With a sly grin, Rain said that if it was that hard, the reward for catching her must be huge. As he pushed through the tall grass, Rem told him not to even think about it because the queen was a terrifying opponent even for high-rank adventurers. Just then, the girl got excited about something she spotted, like she found what they were looking for. Jumping down a slope, she shouted that she finally found the rat spider's hunting ground. While she was still mid-fall, Rem fired a few arrows, dropping 2 of the monsters down there. Without wasting time, the warrior followed her and took down 2 more rat spiders. The ponytailed guy told him to follow him, saying he'd seen a huge swarm of rat spiders. Rem said they must have caught their scent. As they fought, the girl told Bart they should finish this before the others showed up, and the warrior agreed. Watching Rem and Bart fight, Rain asked the cleric if it was really okay for him not to fight, since they were splitting the money evenly. While rummaging through his bag, the priest said all they needed to do was light the campfire and get drinks ready for the camp. Rain asked if that was seriously all, and the young cleric said the 2 of them never planned to let him fight from the start. Rain said he didn't get why they'd even put out the request, and Sammy explained it was because they genuinely just wanted to help. Sammy said they'd answered the call as soon as they heard Rain needed money for the priesthood exam. Even after they'd already made more than enough, they kept doing it anyway. Being around those 2, you could just feel how much they cared. Rain asked if it was like unconditional love and said it sounded like something God would be happy to hear. Smiling, the priest agreed. The young cleric said that, even though he didn't really know why, he felt this sense of solidarity that couldn't be explained by God. He thought you could call it the simple desire to be with other people. Sammy said he had a lot of fun adventuring with them, and the days they spent together made his heart feel completely full. Realizing he'd been talking a lot, he apologized for rambling and said that, as a priest, it was kind of embarrassing. Rain said he agreed. It really was nice traveling with someone. He remembered when he used to travel with his companions, and that made him think of Tarina. Rain then asked if Sammy happened to know anything about Tarina, and the young man asked if, by Tarina, he meant the Witch of Ashes. While the others kept fighting, the priest said there was no way he could know, and Rain asked if the shaman had been taken by the church for heresy. He said it felt like it had happened, and at the same time, like it hadn't. Just then, the purple-haired man who'd been hunting rat spiders came face to face with a massive monster. In the forest, everyone heard his screams of pain. The adventurers wondered what the hell that was. Bart rushed over to where it was happening, thinking this was insane. Seeing the huge creature with the adventurer in its mouth, Rem asked if that was for real. Breaking out in a cold sweat, they shouted that it was the queen. That's when everyone realized that, by some cruel twist of fate, the queen who almost never came out was up on the surface. Nervously, Rain asked why the queen was above ground, and Sandy, weirdly calm, said the spider looked about twice the size of a normal queen. So Rem explains that its size was because of how long the monster had been left alone. All of a sudden, the queen lifts her head and starts screaming, causing this piercing pain in anyone who hears it. Everyone starts running, and Bart tries to warn them not to turn their backs on the monster, but they don't listen. The soldiers notice the queen screams. Seeing that, Sammy tells Rem and Bart they need to fall back. Rain asks why, since it's just a big monster, but the priest says it's not that simple. Because when the queen shows up, the rat spiders group up in packs of 6, so rookies aren't enough to take them down. Right then, the rat spiders start attacking all the adventurers there, including Rem. She defends herself and also hits one of the rats that was about to attack another adventurer. Bart reminds Rem it's pointless fighting the soldiers, and that they need to aim for the queen. Rem says she knows. Looking at the other 2, the leader tells the priest to take care of the rookies and asks Rain to protect the cleric. Using 4 arrows at once, the green-haired girl fires them at the queen with perfect skill. Seeing that, the protagonist realizes it's Kaya's technique, simultaneous precision shot. Several rat spiders rush the archer, but Bart protects her, blocking them with his axe. The warrior charges the queen and, after a jump, buries his axe into her. The adventurers who see it cheer, saying they got the queen. But then something rises out of the blood, like black ink. Noticing it, the protagonist tells him to get away from it, otherwise he'll die. Bart jumps back, and at that exact moment, the liquid sprays out. Everyone wonders what it is, because it looks like it's alive. The queen, who looked defeated, pulls the axe out of her head and flings it away. That's when Bart realizes the axe melted. Then the queen starts ripping out her own eyes, growing new ones in their place. Suddenly, she turns to Bart, who's frozen right in front of her. while knocking down some of the soldiers. Rem thinks this is really bad. Calling out to Bart, she tells him to run. But he's paralyzed and can't do anything except get his arm bitten by the creature. Seeing her companion suffering, Rem ignores the soldiers attacking her and declares she'll defeat the queen no matter what. Shooting an arrow into the spider's temple, Rem asks if it's going to keep ignoring her. Like she's kicking trash bags, she starts tossing the soldiers away. The cleric calls to Rain, telling him to leave him there and join the attack. But Rain is frozen, remembering the time he got poisoned. And watching the spider, he thinks it's definitely dark magic, so there has to be a dark mage nearby. Sammy grabs Rain by the shoulder, asking what he's doing just standing there. Rain says he can't use attack spells, and there's no one else there who can fight. Nervous, the priest begs Rain to save his companions' lives. Breaking into a cold sweat, Rain looks around and sees his teammates getting taken down one by the monsters. With tears falling, he asks how much they get for killing the queen. As the monster bites him, the cleric says it should be worth about 20 gold coins. That's worth as much as 1,000 rat spiders. Hearing that, the protagonist says that's not so bad. Then Rain hits the queen with a stick that, when it strikes the monster, explodes. Everyone is shocked. Facing the creature, Rain taunts it, saying he'll finish it with his own hands. Casting a lightning spell, he creates a huge beam of light, blinding everyone nearby. The queen, who'd been holding Rem and Bart with her legs, throws them away. Channeling his aura, the protagonist tells the priest to take care of Rem and Bart. Rain calls out to 2 of the extras, telling them that if they want to make it out alive, they need to protect Sammy. Staring down the creature, Rain says he'll personally take it down. The monster has lost a leg, but it doesn't seem to affect it at all. So the boy, determined, charges the monster while casting a spell. He destroys some of the soldiers along the way. Sammy worries about him, but all he can do now is tend to the wounded. Facing the queen, Rain throws a fireball, hitting the creature in the neck. The monster tries to counterattack, but the protagonist slides underneath and starts forming a 3-star magic circle. Right as he's about to cast the spell, one of the creature's legs stops him, barely missing him. Since there was no guarantee a 3-star spell would work, and the magic he could use was limited, he tells himself he needs to stay calm. So he decides he has to size the enemy up first, activating Bel Sidious. When he looks at the creature, he realizes it's 3-star black magic. One of the soldiers tries to attack him, but Rain dodges easily. Summoning a magic rope, he thinks that with that level of concentrated black poison, his current body wouldn't be able to handle it. So if he couldn't block it with Bel Curious, he'd have to use 4-star magic. And since the black mage could be nearby, the risk was huge. This was such a mess, he had no idea what he was supposed to do in that situation. Even badly hurt, Rem manages to get back up. Worried, the cleric tells her she should lie down because the bleeding is serious, but she says she's fine. The priest tries to argue, but she cuts him off, asking him to take care of Bart for her. One of the soldiers tries to attack her, but even struggling, she takes him down. Potato Head asks if Rem is okay, and she tells him not to worry about that, he should be dealing with the spider rats. With Rain there, the guy thinks nothing is going to work, so they need to retreat right now. Just then, something slams into the tree next to the boy. Looking closer, Rain realizes it's one of the soldiers' eyes. When he understands what that means, he's terrified because the queen is killing off her own offspring. Noticing Rain up in a tree, the queen hurls one of her creatures and knocks him out of it. But even while he's falling, the poor guy can't catch a break, the spider rushes him, and he's forced to defend himself, summoning an earth barrier. Face to face with the creature, he thinks this is the end, but then an arrow flies at the queen and hits her right in the eye. Frozen, the protagonist can only watch. The queen yanks the arrow out of her eye, and Rem says she warned her not to ignore her. Furious, the spider charges at the girl. Sammy yells for Rem to run, but she thinks she just has to hold out a little longer. The monster keeps coming, relentless. Rain mutters that this sucks as he casts another lightning spell. Pulling a dagger out of her leg, Rem tells Rain to handle his own stuff and charges the creature. She knocks the queen to the ground and asks if he's going to finish it. Almost in tears, Rain tells himself he has to stay calm. Hiding behind a rock, he thinks he can deal with it without being noticed. Then Rain starts focusing, forming a circle made up of multiple triangles. After landing a kick on the queen, Ren feels a little dizzy, and just dodging the attacks is already exhausting, but she has to hang on a bit longer. But suddenly, everything around her turns gray, and she passes out without wasting a second. The queen flings her away. The cleric tries to help her, but he's stopped by the extra, who is supposed to be protecting him. Meanwhile, Rain, still behind the rock, keeps concentrating on his spell. Taking advantage of some soldiers getting distracted while attacking the extra, Sammy breaks free and runs to Rem. The protagonist spits blood from the sheer effort it takes to complete the spell. Right as the queen is about to finish Rem off, the priest shows up, dodging the blow with the girl in his arms. That shocks everyone, even the creature, whose eyes go wide. Rem asks what Sammy thinks he's doing. Grabbing her by the shirt, he says they have to get out of there alive so they can keep smiling. So she needs to stop doing reckless stuff. She apologizes and, holding onto the cleric's shoulder, says that when they get back, he'll have to write a reflection letter. He agrees, and with both of them facing the queen, she tells him he'd better be ready. The queen is about to attack, and the two brace themselves for it. But then something unexpected happens. Rain's spell is finally ready. He launches a massive fireball, taking the creature down. That spell was made of 4 layers of triangles. The runes used for the inscription were angle, rule, bind, and finally, disperse. Then the math to solve it included 14 polynomials and 7 rational functions. The coordinate equation calculation was finished, along with the power equation calculations. Then he activates the last circle disperse, creating a pillar of fire that ends up burning the queen to a crisp. Everyone ducks to shield themselves from the flames, and when they look up, they see the queen basically turn into charcoal. Leaning against a rock, Rain comments on how pathetic he was. After all, in his past life, he could cast that spell 7 times in a row without any problem. With the wind, the queen's ashes scatter through the air. The spider rats that had looked furious a moment ago now just looked like scared rabbits. The adventurers notice and say they can't let them get away. With everything finally over, the priest runs over to Bart, who's lying on the ground. Looking at what's left of the queen, Rem thinks about how that terrifying creature that take him down in a single hit. As the cleric approaches Bart, he says he's going to heal him, and Rem says she's feeling dizzy. She asks how the warrior is doing, and Sammy says the guy is tough, so he'll recover without too much trouble. Looking at Rem, Bart apologizes and asks if she's okay. She says she got the treatment she needed, so she'll be fine. And he shouldn't worry after all, they were just unlucky with that fight. She adds that it's weird the queen had regeneration like that, since there's nothing about it in the guild database. But even so, the boys still managed to bring her down with one blow. As night falls, the group rushes to help Rain. The mage says the kid's condition is from mana overload. If that's the case, Rem says he probably burned through all his mana in that last attack. But why Rain hid still bugs Rem, so she figures that since the queen was close, he needed cover. Sammy says they should talk about it later. Right now, they need to focus on saving him, and she agrees. Meanwhile, Rain, unconscious, flashes back to when he was still Lin. Surrounded by his companions, he asks not to be officially recorded as a member of the hero party, and for that to be reported to His Majesty too. An elderly man says he doesn't get why the boy would ask that, since it was something His Majesty had prepared to honor those who devoted themselves to humanity. Esther asks if he hates them or something, and says if he's messing around again, he needs to stop calling him a troublemaker. Confused, the protagonist says it's not like that, and that he's just different from all of them. That makes Freedy's face tense up, and she demands to know what he's talking about. But then Lin cuts in, saying he doesn't carry a destiny like Kai's or Freed. He doesn't even have a mission to fulfill like Esther, and he didn't set out on this journey for someone else either. He did it purely out of personal curiosity, being part of it was nothing more than coincidence. So Lin says he doesn't deserve to have his name recorded, because he can't go and stain their reputation. Hearing that, Kai's puts a hand on Lin's head, and everyone starts laughing, saying how funny he is for worrying about that. Annoyed, the boy says it's not worrying. It's just a highly logical conclusion. Then Esther takes his hand and, with a calm look, says that no matter what anyone else says, he's part of their group. So he doesn't need to think about sacrificing himself, he should just do what he thinks is best. After all, that world already recognizes him as the hero party's archmage. When Rain wakes up, he's in the middle of the city. Being carried by Bart, he asks where they are, and Rem looks surprised he finally woke up. She tells him they're on their way to the school. With a sigh, Rain feels his whole body aching. He thinks maybe he overdid it, but he's still glad they didn't get caught by the Black Mage. Bart asks if Rain was the one who summoned that fire magic earlier. Rain thinks for a moment. Noticing that, Rem says he shouldn't lie, they're already sure it was him. A bit reluctantly, Rain says he wasn't trying to hide it. Hearing that, she mutters that it really was him. They say that since they thought he was going to keep it secret, they reported that they used a scroll, then ask if he wants them to correct it. But Rain says they should just leave it as it is. Since he seems to have his reasons, Rem says she won't ask anything else. And since he's the one who saved them, they'll definitely pay him back. Our main guy says no, but the moment the cleric says he should keep all the rewards, he immediately says yes. Rem looks at the kid like, seriously? And he asks why she's looking at him like that because, come on, he earned it. She agrees, but says she was kind of expecting him to say he'd dedicate the reward to everyone who worked hard and split it fairly. Rain says she's dreaming a little too much, so everyone starts laughing about it. The guy admits he was just messing around and says 5 gold coins are enough for him. But Bart says it's only fair he keeps everything. Rain tries to argue, but Rem cuts them off and suggests the kid should use his connections and turn this into an opportunity. She asks what he thinks, and he agrees, saying it's a good idea. Then the priest asks if he hadn't asked about Tarina earlier. Our protagonist says yes and asks why. Sammy says he overheard something while he was in the church district, so it might not be accurate. But from what it sounded like, the shaman had gotten involved with dark magic in her later years. Rain says goodbye to Rem's group with a smile. But after everyone leaves, his face turns serious, and he thinks that, apparently, the girl really did get mixed up with dark magic. At the library, Rain flips through a book, resting his chin on his hand. He closes it, thinking there wasn't any mention of Tarina being involved with dark magic. Staring at the book in his hands, he ends up having another flashback from when he was still Lin. Lin tosses aside a worn-out book. Gripping his staff, the boy moves forward, toward a place that had fallen into ruins, an eroded village down in the abyss. Inside an abandoned house, half submerged in the swamp, they ended up finding Tarina. Back then, she was 7 years old. With a snap of his fingers, Lin makes a makeshift campfire out of bits of wood and torn book pages. He says that she'd do the trick. Then the girl starts coughing. Lin turns and slowly walks over to her. Tarina looks terrified, and Lin pulls something out of his bag. Her fear disappears when she realizes it's food. Holding out the bread, he asks if she wants to eat. He tells her not to worry, there's no poison or anything. The rest of the group comes closer, and Lin asks if she's not going to eat, saying it's all he has to offer. But she stays silent, and Lin sighs. Then the girl finally breaks down, saying her mom, her dad, and everyone she knew were dead. Hearing that, Lin asks if her village had any contact with the outside world. She says she doesn't really know, and Lin stands up and says he gets it, he didn't even know a village like that existed. But he says maybe now she's the only one who still remembers that village and its people. He says that sounds really lonely, a life nobody remembers. Then he asks if she's okay with that because if she dies, that place will vanish without a trace. Almost crying, Tarina clutches his clothes and says she doesn't want that. Lin steps closer and says, in that case, she needs to eat. He hands her the bread and says even if she doesn't want to, she has to eat to survive. So she can remember the people who live there. That's something only she can do. Then the girl starts eating like her life depends on it because it does. As she eats, tears run down her face. And from that day on, Tarina starts following him everywhere. The kid has talent for magic, but Rain says he never meant to turn her into some great mage. All he taught her were the spells she'd need to survive, even after they eventually went their separate ways. She always learned diligently, never complaining. They practiced putting out small fires with water magic and saving people from falls with earth magic. Every spell was meant to help others. Sitting around a campfire, Freedy asks if Lin has a soft spot for teaching younger kids, and Esther asks if that's true. He tells them to say something that actually makes sense. Watching the girl practice magic, he wonders if what he's feeling is sympathy or compassion. Maybe he feels connected to her because her situation is kind of like his past. The day comes to leave Tarina at the church. Even though her expression is gloomy, she surprisingly says goodbye without making a scene. Esther says that staying in that town would only make things harder and that they should leave fast. Lin agrees. In his thoughts, the boy just hoped Tarina would be okay. A man was showing her around the house, saying it might feel huge at first, but she'd get used to it soon. The girl, looking miserable, stayed quiet. Noticing that, the man tried to reassure her, saying she didn't need to worry about anything because from that moment on, they'd be her family. That's when Tarina, who'd been silent, finally spoke up and said that wasn't her home. She created a magic circle made of squares and added that they weren't her family, only her master was. An old man in black robes came down the stairs and told the priest the child's admission process was complete. The man freaked out when he saw the priest pinned to a pillar by tree vines. Asking if the kid had done it, the old man told them to send a pursuit team. Smiling, the priest said he was fine and there was no need for a pursuit team, they should just let her go. The old man tried to argue, but gave up. With a sigh, the priest remembered the moment the girl trapped him. He asked what she thought she was doing and told her to let him go. Tarina apologized, but said the place she needed to be was by her master's side. The priest commented to the old man about how nice it is to be young, and the old man replied that the priest was pretty tolerant. While walking with his group, Lin suddenly heard someone calling him. When he looked back, he froze. It was Tarina, exhausted, running toward them and calling him master. The protagonist asked how she made it there, and she explained she'd escaped using the magic she learned from him. Dropping to her knees, she begged him to take her with them, promising she wouldn't cause trouble. Lin looked at Esther, checking what she thought. He ended up agreeing but said they couldn't stay together all the way to the end. He also asked about her escaping with magic if she hurt anyone. She said no, so Lin said it was fine, and reminded her that magic should never be used to hurt people. And that's how Tarina joined the heroes group. As they traveled together, the girl's talent started to bloom. Even though she was reckless, she was the real deal. While training with the others, they noticed her potential and started teaching her in different ways. Tarina was like a sponge, picking up new spells and skills fast. Sometimes she seemed a little too timid, but her abilities improved quickly. And once she reached the point where she could handle strong monsters, they officially accepted her as part of the party. One night around the campfire, Esther came over with some gifts for the girl. It was a new dress, and it made her really happy. Touching Tarina's shoulder, Freedy pointed at Lin, who was holding a straw hat. The girl thought it was a present for her, but Lin pulled it back, saying it was for him. As the journey got close to the end, during the Battle of the Abyss, she became strong enough to be a real help. In a ruined cabin, Lin told her she had to stay there, but she insisted on helping, saying he knew what she could do and that she could fight. Just then, Esther showed up and said she agreed with Lin. They couldn't take Tarina with them. The girl called out to the other party members, asking them to say something, but they both stayed silent. Sad, she said they'd been together for so long, were they really planning to leave her behind now? Lin said she was still a newbie, and the enemy they were about to face was way too dangerous. Plus, they'd started this journey as just the four of them, so it should be the four of them who finished it. Ruffling her hair, Lin told her not to worry, they'd definitely come back, and then he'd teach her more magic. She swallowed back her tears and said she'd keep waiting for them. Lin smiled, and they headed out. And that's how their adventures with her came to an end. To Rain, none of that made sense because the girl would soon get involved with dark magic, of all things. It was suspicious that books related to Tarina had suddenly ended up on the censorship list. Rain opened the book, and Rudian laid it on his forehead, telling him his research progress had gone from 37.9% to 39.9%. He's happy, but it's weird that wiping out the rat spiders only bumped things up by 2%, so he figures he's still got a long way to go. On the last page of the book, there's a drawing of Lin. Right under it, the girl had described him as the most amazing master in the world. That makes Rain smile. He's about to say something about her, but then, all of a sudden, the smile disappears. The sun was coming up over the place where the battle against the rat spiders happened. People in green robes looked annoyed, saying they thought it could attract the golden children and cut down the number of adventurers. Because the heat from the flames was still there, and because of the blast radius, someone else figures it had to be at least a 4-star spell. And if what the people they interrogated said was true, that means the adventurers, Rem and Bart, were there. The more impatient robe person swears they'll get revenge, but the calmer one says that would just draw the golden children's attention. Then the other one says they just need to make sure they don't get caught. The calmer one says there are more important things to do before revenge, and the hot-headed one asks what that would be. So the calmer one says they should inform Tarina first. When he gets to school, right in front of the clubroom, the protagonist gets greeted by 2 students who ask if he's okay. He says he's fine and they shouldn't worry. At the front of the room, the club leader says they're about to start and asks everyone to sit, adding that the number of members has gone up a lot. The guy introduces himself as Joan, president of the local development magic club, and says he honestly didn't expect so many people, but he's really happy. Joan says he hopes they'll all get along. He's about to start explaining the club's purpose and goals when someone walks into the room. The guy turns around, still saying the club's goal is to develop magic for local development, but he freezes when he sees who it is. Everyone's shocked, because it's Logan. After a pause, the man introduces himself as Logan and says he hopes they'll get along. A little nervous, Joan says he showed up at just the right time. Waving his hand, he tells Logan to take a seat. But Logan freezes when he realizes the only empty seat is the one next to Rain. The protagonist, as smug as ever, points at the chair beside him with a nasty little grin. Once everyone sits down, Joan decides they need to start with a fresh mindset and asks them to take good care of things. Rain comments that, looks like Logan really keeps his promises, and Logan says he's just following the rules. While Joan is explaining, the protagonist is lost in thought. He wonders if he'd be able to beat the black mages if he ever had to face them. Summoning his Rudian. He sees he only has 12 cane magic power and 311 stamina, so he thinks he needs to toughen up his body fast. But he can't just do random workouts. It'd be better to have someone who can guide him. Then Rain ends up thinking of Logan, who's basically perfect for that. Later, on the training field, Rain is suffering through Logan's training. During the session, Logan remembers when the kid asked him to train him. Logan says he doesn't get why Rain would ask that. After all, Rain's the one who beat him. So what's the point of learning from someone who lost? The protagonist says Logan shouldn't hold a grudge like that, and says Logan is like the poster boy of the next generation of the Musclehead Specialist group. That pisses Logan off, veins popping on his forehead. He says he lost the fight, so he deserves to be ignored. But he also says there's no reason for the kid to trash his school. Rain scratches his head, confused, and sighs, saying he's not free enough to just go around mocking people. Capping his book, the protagonist says that since Logan seems to be getting the wrong idea, he'll be more direct. Pointing at him, Rain says Logan is strong, so he wants Logan to help with his physical training. Plus, he's not making fun of him. He's only asking because he was genuinely surprised someone that age could be that strong. Logan appreciates it, but at the same time, he's confused about what Rain means by that age. The protagonist says a strong body is the most important basic foundation, but he doesn't have that. So he plans to train properly. Otherwise, he'd just be wasting time. So he asks if Logan doesn't think it'd be better to do it with guidance from someone who actually knows what they're doing. Logan sighs and agrees with the kid, saying there probably isn't anyone more qualified than him in that field. But he says he can't teach Rain, so the kid should find someone else. Thinking the issue is money, our protagonist tries to offer a good amount, but Logan refuses, saying that's not the reason. The kid is from the magical aristocracy, and Logan is from one of the 8 schools, so, according to him, they're enemies. And enemies aren't supposed to support or help each other, which makes the kid look annoyed. Rain calls out to him, and the moment the man turns around, the kid already has an attack magic circle aimed right at his face. Making a gunshot sound with his mouth, the kid disperses the spell. He says Logan's lucky, because if he wanted him dead, he'd already be dead. Rain asks Logan if he knows why he didn't do it, and with smoke coming off his hand, our protagonist explains it's because Logan isn't his enemy. They're not soldiers, they're students, and that isn't a battlefield, it's a place to learn. He says there's no reason for them to be enemies, since they're classmates exploring the same area of magic. After thinking for a bit, Logan agrees, surprised he didn't expect the kid to hit him with an argument that's solid. Back in the present, melted on the floor, Rain is calling for Logan. He says he's finally done, and Logan says the kid is, surprisingly, doing pretty well. The kid asks if Logan finally believes he's serious, and Logan says yes, then tells him they should move on to the next exercise. Our protagonist complains, asking him to help him up, and the man says he needs to get up on his own. Logan asks what would happen if someone saw them working together, since both the aristocracy and the schools would come after them. Hearing that, Rain asks if the guy's muscles are just for show, saying that if something like that happened, he should just knock out whoever complained. That pulls a small smile from the brute, and he bends down to help the kid up. The teacher watching the scene smiles, seeing the two of them actually getting along. Just then, Krista walks into the training room. Seeing them together, she asks what they're doing there and whether they're fighting again. They deny it and say they're just working out. Ignoring the girls' freak out, Logan hands Rain a protein shake. Watching that, Krista asks what's going on with Rain and whether Logan is manipulating him. Losing his patience, the man asks what her problem is and says they're having a meaningful moment right now. She says she gets that they're classmates, but asks why he's suddenly being so friendly with Rain. At that moment, a teacher shows up behind her and, with a hand on her shoulder, says she's being loud like always. She starts sweating, realizing it's Professor Owen. Logan asks what brings him there. Owen says he saw a bunch of monkeys gathered around and stopped to look, and also that he has an announcement. The boys ask what kind of announcement, and he says he's got terrible news. It's basically a rite of passage. He separates the ones who will rise from the ones who will fall. Looking at the boys, Owen explains the school's educational philosophy is endless competition. Turning away, he says anyone who falls behind on the exams gets dropped immediately, so they'd better be ready. A little later, Rain is lying on his bed. Picking up a book, he remembers the exams Owen mentioned. He wonders if he should check what's coming up until then. Suddenly, his Rudian starts bugging out like it's glitching. He's wondering what's happening when a blinding light appears. The next moment, Rain finds himself in a white room. Rudian tells him his unique magic research has reached 40%. Rain asks why it's happening now, and then he's asked to confirm opening a new mana circle. The analysis starts and something called Mental Barrier, Lord of the Fluent World, is installed in Rain. Inside this mental barrier, the success rate for magic combinations using unique rooms and unique magic formulas goes up by 33%, and his power goes up by 66%. A rune appears in his hand, and Rudian warns that the mana needed to cast it is 20,000, while the mana he has is 12,564. Our protagonist is confused, and the message explains that this is the activation seal meant to use the mental barrier, Lord of the Fluent World. Everything glitches out again, and he ends up back in his room. Staring at Rudian, Rain thinks about everything that happened. Mental barriers, out of all the sages from the past, only 2 were ever able to use that secret technique. Knowing that, Rain figures what he saw was seriously incredible. When the sun comes up, our protagonist wraps up his hand and decides it's time to head to the black market. He thinks the weather's great, unlike the last few days, which were so chaotic he could barely think straight. Rain feels like, at the very least, he can enjoy a little peace after all that time. Just then, he bumps into someone and apologizes, saying he didn't see them. The person says it's fine, and that it's no big deal between them. When Rain looks up, he sees it's Bart and his group. He greets them, and says it's been a while. Rem immediately asks what he means since it's only been a few days since they last saw each other. Rain agrees, and suddenly, Bart hoists him up onto his shoulder. Rem says they should get going, while Rain squirms around in the warrior's grip. The kid asks what the guy's doing out of nowhere and tells him to put him down. Laughing, Rem says college students are always busy, and this is the only way they can hang out. Rain says this is kidnapping, and the cleric says they heard there'd be an award for that last spider rat subjugation, and there's no way the hero's sitting it out. Rain asks if he really has to accept it, and Bart tells him to stop being so stubborn, and that it's actually good to show up to these ceremonies. Plus, the award is being given by the Adventurers Guild headquarters, so Rain asks what he means by headquarters. The group finally reaches the guild branch, and outside, people are whispering about them. With dead fish eyes, Rain asks why everyone's making such a fuss. Rem explains that Bart comes from the school of the only saint of the 7 swords, and she's an archer from the drunken archer school, and on top of that, he took down the queen in a single strike. Rain says maybe their masters are just weak. Hearing that, the girl gets furious, but Sammy holds her back. Calm as always, Bart says it might look that way from the kid's perspective, but he and Rem have fought countless enemies and made it to silver rank. Still, they never thought they lacked skill until they faced the queen. That leaves Rain thinking. Then someone shows up, an archer. He pulls back his hood, and Rain flinches. The man who looks a lot like the drunken archer says, "So these are the rising stars among the young adventurers." Everyone murmurs that he's the bow saint. Sammy says the Empire gathers the best warriors of the era and names them the Emperor's 4 martial stars, granting them huge power and honor. And, as expected, their presence is overwhelming, just like the rumors said. Looking at Rem, who seems kind of down, he asks what's wrong. The archer, looking confused, walks closer. After taking a good look at the girl, he says it's a big surprise. Asking what his cutie is doing there, the girl tries to play it off, saying he's mistaking her for someone else. He says that would make more sense because there's no way the girl who left the dojo and dyed her hair would be out here playing adventure. He asks if she's been following him and whether she even has her brother's permission. The girl starts punching him. Anyway, the man turns to Bart and asks if he's the leader of the group. The warrior confirms it, and Rauren says, "Yeah, that's obvious considering he took down that mutant. He must be pretty strong." While Rem struggles in Sammy's arms, Rauren says Bart's probably had a rough time because of her, but tells him to take good care of Rem. With his usual calm look, Bart says that since they're a party, nobody takes care of anyone. They cover each other's weaknesses. Hearing that, the archer says he likes Bart more and more, and that if he keeps it up, he'll hit platinum rank in no time. Still frozen, Rain watches the archer, thinking it's weird how he looks exactly like Kai's. Rauren walks up to the boy and says his face looks familiar. It's strange, but he's sure he's seen that face somewhere before. But then he realizes it's not the face, it's the guy's vibe. So Rain introduces himself as Rain Ludwig. Hearing that, the man says, in that case, the kid must be Scalzi's grandson, patting him on the shoulder. He says that, looking at the kid now, he could tell the boy looked a bit like Scalzi, especially around the eyes. And he says that back when that man was in town, he owed him a lot. While they talked, the protagonist wondered if Kai's could talk when he talked like that. Noticing the bow on Rauren's back, Rain found himself wondering what kind of condition his companion's bow was in. Right then, the bow starts vibrating like crazy. Gripping the weapon tightly, Rauren wonders why it's acting like that. When he looks back, he comes face to face with a warrior. The warrior tells him it's time to go, and the archer agrees, kicking off the event. With a sheet of paper in hand, the man starts reading, but then complains about how long it is. He ends up just skipping the whole thing and congratulates them on a job well done. Moving on to the rewards, Rauren says it'll be 2 gold coins, and each member of the group will get 500 contribution points. After the event ends, the group gets sworn with offers to join other guilds. Watching from the sidelines, Rain and Sammy comment that Rem and Bart are pretty popular. The cleric asks if it's really okay to say the queen was defeated with a scroll, and Rain confirms it is. Sick of all of it, the protagonist says he's heading out, and Sammy says in that case, he'll let the others know. And before the kid leaves, he tells him he's been promoted to bronze rank now, so someone might recognize him on the street. Still, he hopes nothing troublesome happens. In an alley, the protagonist uses his Rudian, checking how much longer it'll take before he can use the mental barrier. He realizes he's still got a long way to go, but he figures once he gets it, he can focus on mana training. Mental barrier, the sage's domain he never reached in his past life, was finally within reach now. Just then, someone calls out to him, calling him young Master Ludwig. The person tells him that even if he goes that way, he won't reach the black market. It's not that he took a wrong turn because of a bunch of circumstances. The black market merchants fled, so it's temporarily shut down. The person takes off his hat and, saying it's a pleasure to meet him, reveals he's part of the Magic League. He asks if he can have a moment of Rain's time. When they get to a restaurant, he asks what Rain wants to eat, but Rain says they should just get to the point. The man says Rain doesn't need to be so guarded, he's not there to grill him about the black market. Suspicious, the protagonist wonders how they even found out he was heading to the black market. On top of that, what really throws him off is how much mana the man is getting off. Apologizing for forgetting to introduce himself, the man shows a watch and introduces himself as Doran Slade, saying he works in the League's Special Operations Department. He also reveals he used to be the boy's father's secretary back when his father was student council president. The protagonist asks what he's getting at. The man explains he just wants to make it clear he's not shady, and that he's on the boy's side. Also, he wants to confirm a few things with Rain, asking if Rain was the one who used the magic that took down the mutated queen, because there are no records of Bart's group visiting a magic shop recently. Even assuming they could have bought it earlier, there hasn't been a 4-star mage capable of making a scroll that powerful in the last 10 years. So the man says he checked whether Scalzi Ludwig had made one to protect his grandson, but that wasn't it either. Giving the boy a sharp look, the man says that in that case, there's only one conclusion. Realizing where Doran is going with this, The protagonist says he never planned to hide it from the start, but he did have concerns. With a cold look, Doran asks if he means the Dark Mage. Taking it how much the guy seems to know, Rain wonders if he's just investigating him or straight up stalking him like some weirdo. Just then, the waiter brings the food, but the order's wrong. Doran asks if it's for 2 people. Nervous, the waiter asks if the man was only planning to order for 1 because since there were 2 of them, he assumed it was for 2. Holding 2 skewers, the guy says it's fine, he can eat it all. With his usual dead fish stare, Rain stands up and says that if that's all, he's leaving. Before the kid could leave, Doran said he needed to talk and asked if he'd like to work with the League's Special Operations Department. The protagonist said no, that he was just a student. So the man said the offer was really for after he graduated. Since Cavan was still healthy, the kid would take a long time to inherit the family fortune. So Doran asked what Rain thought about helping him fight crime in the meantime. If he accepted, he'd have the authority to investigate dark magic-related cases on his own, and it'd be a great place to build a career. As he headed out, Rain said he wasn't interested. Before the kid left, Doran mentioned the Dark Church had been getting more active. And because of that, the League's higher-ups were in denial, drunk on peace, but something big was definitely about to happen. Pointing his skewer upward, the man said he really wanted to believe they were ready to stop them, but he wasn't sure that was actually true. Before leaving, the protagonist said he had no idea what Doran was talking about, but that he'd think about it. Doran thanked him. As he walked, Rain wondered if he'd really have to fight the church in this life, thinking maybe he should just let the operations department handle it. Smiling, Doran shouted after him, saying that if he ever needed anything from the black market, he should look for the VIP escort mission during vacation. Rain just looked at him, embarrassed. Doran watched the kid walking through the city, and then suddenly a girl dropped out of the sky and asked if he'd been turned down. The girl, with huge dark circles under her eyes, said this year's freshmen were talented and asked why he'd gone straight for the Genius Yo Master. Doran said that, in the end, the kid wouldn't be part of the golden generation. Slumping awkwardly into a chair, the woman asked why. Doran said Rain didn't seem to have had any contact with Tarina, so they should look for other suspects. Then she asked if there was really a chance any of DeLayton's freshmen had been in contact with Tarina. While drooling over his skewer, Doran said his gut told him yes, and since contact could have happened even before they entered the school, they should check their pasts. In his head, Doran agreed with the girl. I mean, how could the kid be considered part of the golden generation? He thought that, in the end, Cavan created something monstrous because he'd never met anyone whose future scared him as much as Rain's. At the library, the protagonist explained to Karen that he wouldn't be able to get the book. Saying it was fine, the librarian said it had all happened because she'd been careless. She also said she was happy Rain was safe. Rain gave a nervous smile and asked if some weird person wearing a hat had shown up around there, but Karen said no. But after thinking for a bit, she remembered something and said someone from the Special Errands Department had come by. She said they were reviewing some senior librarians they'd known for a long time and then left. But Karen said she hadn't seen them, so she didn't know what they looked like. Rain said he got it, and, saying it was time to head back to the dorm, he thanked her for the info. Walking through the dorm hallways, the protagonist, realizing Doran had been there, wondered who the man had talked to on the black market. Seeing 2 delivery boxes in front of his room, he thought the time had come. Inside were 2 massive spirit jewels. Rain figured he could finally store the mana he needed for the mental barrier. He placed his hands on the jewels. His current mana was around 12,000, and the mental barrier spell needed around 20,000, so he decided to store 8,000 to use when he cast the spell. The spheres started glowing intensely. It seemed to drain a huge chunk of his mana, making him collapse from exhaustion. Worn out, Rain said the mana infusion was done, but he still had to wait for it to stabilize. Night fell, and Rain was meditating. Opening his eyes, he said it was time. Making a hand sign, he activated the mental formation. Honored Fluid World. The spheres glowed, and the spell started forming. At that moment, the jewels began to crack, and Rain ended up coughing up blood from the strain. Lying on the floor, he thought that, as expected, he'd failed. But when he looked at his palm, the room was shining a bright gold. Rooms were glowing around him too. Getting up, he felt something different, and when he tested a magic circle, Rain said it was impossible. Now he could feel it instinctively. That magic formation was perfect. The rooms were optimizing themselves, and the equations were being refined. Coming back down to the ground, he figured that was what his mind looked like a mental barrier was a mirror reflecting a sorcerer's thoughts. The second mage, Riat Warden, had said that once, and now he finally got it. The desire for truth shows up as a mental image. The Honored One's shifting world didn't give him any new knowledge, it just made up for his technical know-how and his weak spots. But for Rain, that was perfect. Now he could master his spells through self-study, with 0 guidance. Smiling, he thought he was 1 step closer to becoming a 7-star mage. In the teacher's lounge, Chancellor Medelia Page was asking if the student's schedule was a mess. Then, the substitute teacher, Kyle, confirmed it, saying that with the field practice going on, they could focus on the first years next week. Medelia said she'd heard the first-year class was packed with exceptional students, which had some of the teachers curious. A teacher named Ivan said he didn't know much else, but it sounded like it'd be interesting, especially that prodigy who, until recently, had been hiding his talent. After all, nobody knew what was going to happen. Fuming, Ellen stood there with her arms crossed, thinking about how so much had gone wrong. Like she could read the girl's mind, Carolyn told her to calm down. One of the teachers commented that Caroline looked pretty confident, and that the next one to get crushed after Logan might be the student she was teaching. Laughing, Carolyn said, "Guess we'll see." In her head, Medelia thought that if things went the way they were supposed to, Camisa, heir to the Page family, could lead DeLayton's students as their golden pillar. Just then, Professor Marhena got her attention, saying they should start moving, gathering aura. She said that in that case, they should notify the academy to gather the students immediately, because starting that day, the exams would begin. In the classroom, our protagonist looked like a zombie. He figured Logan must think he was made of iron. Watching the other students jump up right away, Rain asked Krista what was going on. She explained they'd been told to go to the auditorium. It was for the exam briefing. Rain asked if the exams weren't supposed to be next week, but Krista said that's how Delayton worked. They changed the schedule out of nowhere. He asked why, and that's when Gertrude showed up, explaining it was to stop them from procrastinating until the last minute. Our protagonist said that if someone can deliver the same results no matter when, that's a talent, so the teachers probably knew what they were doing. Gertrude laughed and agreed, but in her head she thought the boy was annoying and that you really couldn't like rich kids. Standing up, Krista said that's exactly why you had to give it your all, with no regrets. When they got to the auditorium, they walked in, and as she looked around, Gertrude noticed the students' faces. They did not look happy about what they were seeing. Rain ended up spotting Logan and called out to him. Seeing him, Logan said Rain had gotten there pretty fast, and Rain said it was nothing. Gertrude then muttered in Rain's ear, warning him not to become friends with Logan. He was one of the rivals Rain should be worried about. Rain, on the other hand, said there was no way the guy could be his rival after all. He gave him protein every day. Furious, she asked if he was a pigeon or something, getting bought off with food. Finally realizing who it was, Logan said even Krista's lackeys were there, and asked if she wanted magical protein too. With veins popping in her face, she said she wasn't in the mood for jokes, so he wanted to fight, he'd better watch himself. Logan, all sarcastic, said he was terrified. Just then, Krista walked up and pulled the two apart, saying they were being way too loud. With a serious look, she told them to leave if they wanted to talk. Rain was startled. He hadn't expected that from Krista, and Gertrude apologized. Stepping away from them, Krista said that if they wanted to stay, they'd have to fight like their lives depended on it. At that moment, a voice greeted them and said she loved the tense vibe and told them to keep that mindset during the exam. Then they saw it was Professor Caroline, and as she got started, she said she was going to announce the exam details. She said the exams would run all week, starting that day through Friday, which made the students furious. On top of that, their exams would be graded by their respective teachers, and if a teacher expelled you, you had to leave the school that same day. Now, if they'd let her, Carolyn said she'd announce the teachers, who would be evaluating them. Out of the shadows, the teachers step forward. When the students see who it is, they freak out. Gertrude starts frantically tapping Rain on the shoulder, and he asks what's wrong with her. Panicking, she asked if he's seriously never heard of Professor Marhina. She used to be the head of the Magic Alliance, and now she's the head professor at Delayton. On top of that, leading the Magic Alliance was an honor only the greatest mage of their era ever got. Logan is shocked to realize a huge name from the magic world just showed up. Gertrude keeps yelling at Rain until she explains that this woman was the one who replaced his grandpa as head of the Alliance, which just leaves him confused. Thinking about what his grandpa was like, the protagonist figures the woman must be a total monster. Then she tells him about the other teachers who came with Marhina. Kyle, a genius who graduated top of 1,378 classes. Professor Jaren, who built her magic tower at 20. And Professor Ellen, who writes for the Daily Magical Hearing newspaper. Saying those were the elite teachers who taught second and third years, Gertrude comments that it was one hell of a lineup. Marhina stays quiet for a while. Then she clears her throat, drawing everyone's attention in the hall. Using an amplification spell, she tells everyone to shut up. Her voice is so loud it actually scares the students. Leaning on her cane, she asks where they think they are and says the whole point of these tests is to weed out useless people like them. She also says the evaluators won't go easy on them like the previous ones did, leaving the kids wondering what she even considers easy. She adds that the teachers judging them are the type who will eliminate you the moment they decide you don't have talent, which makes everyone even more nervous. Seeing they finally look ready for the exams, Marhina smiles and says, not bad. Then she explains the tests will take place in different locations, and each location was assigned based on each student's individual traits. Soon, they'll be told where their test is, so they need to check and head to the designated teacher's room. After that, she declares that this is Delayton. The strong survive and the weak get tossed aside. Telling them to remember that rule well, she dismisses them. Inside what looks like a cave, Professor Kyle says they finally arrive, and from there they'll be taking on a labyrinth. Hearing that, the students start murmuring, wondering if they'll even make it out safely. Resting his hand on his chin, the protagonist says he doesn't remember there being any cave around there. Hearing him, the professor asks what Rain just said. Rain replies that since this is the sacred land of the Red Dragon Legion, it's surprising there'd be a labyrinth here. Kyle's impressed by the kids' knowledge, but says not to worry, the labyrinth is artificial, and he controls everything. He adds that even if they get hurt, their lives probably won't be in danger. That probably makes the students uneasy. Then the professor asks if they shouldn't be more worried about passing the exam. Calmly, he explains he prefers relative grading over absolute grading. In this system, first place gets S rank, second and third get A, and it goes down to F. F means 39th place, and anyone below that has to retake the exam. The main criterion is the time it takes to clear the labyrinth, and clearing it means wiping out every monster inside. They'll take the exam in pairs, and if they can't finish within 40 minutes, they're expelled. A window opens beside Kyle, and he explains the teams were formed based on entrance scores. After checking the results, they should go find their partners. Rain wonders who his partner will be. Then the next moment, a clay doll falls from the sky. He's confused about what it even is, until someone steps on it, crushing it to pieces. Rain's annoyed to see it's Krista. With a weird laugh, she asks if he doesn't think the heavens are cruel because he has to compete with her on the very first day of testing. Telling him to get ready, she says she's going to crush Rain's pride. Just then, Logan shows up and, asking what they're up to, says he wants in. He says he's got good news for Rain, who somehow looks even more miserable, not knowing what's coming. Then the big guy reveals that he and Rain are on the same team. That leaves Krista and Rain confused for a moment. Greeting Logan, Rain says it'd be a pleasure to work with him, but that annoys Krista. She says it makes no sense, because it wouldn't be fair for all the other good students to end up on the same team. Smiling, the main guy asks if she's finally admitted he's actually skilled. She denies it and says he's good enough, I guess. Krista gets a tiny bit of hope when she remembers Rain's entrance exam, but then she remembers he got in through the extra test, and that kills the last bit of hope she had. One student mutters that Rain and Logan are on the same team, and another asks if they didn't fight last time. Logan says he doesn't really care, he's getting first place either way. Hearing that, Rain just smiles and tells them to go ahead and try their luck. Turning back to Logan, Rain asks why he's still obsessed with rankings, and whether the exam really matters if he wants to graduate at the top. Logan asks if Rain is planning to graduate at the top. Logan explains that if that's the goal, then yeah, it matters a lot because there are only 4 official exams each year. Muttering, if that's how it is, Rain turns to Krista and apologizes, saying that this time he can't go easy on her. She looks confused for a second, then smiles and says that's exactly what she wanted. Clapping his hands, the instructor gets everyone's attention and says they have 10 minutes to talk things over before going in. He explains that inside the maze there are 20 routes, and each one has the same number of enemies, but only one team is allowed per route. All the students start talking strategy. Meanwhile, the assistant professor asks Kyle why he always gives that exam to first years. Kyle says the only time you really find out a mage's talent is when they face something they've never dealt with before, leaving the assistant confused. Kyle adds that in those situations, their minds go blank, their judgment gets messed up, and they hesitate. So the exam is meant to spot the ones who shine under pressure. That's his job. Logan talks strategy with Rain, asking what he thinks about just wiping out anything that shows up. Rain says it's not a bad idea, but it'd be better to have a more solid plan before they enter the maze. But someone is talking way too loud and it's messing with Rain's thinking, which starts to annoy him. Mocking him, Krista says that instead of eavesdropping, he could come up with a strategy for his own team. Irritated, Rain tells her to focus on her own team. Krista says that's too bad for him, because she already has her strategy. Logan says she seems pretty confident, considering the limited magic they're allowed to use in the maze, and she confirms it. Calling out to Rain, she asks if he really said he was going to graduate at the top. Then she apologizes, saying she's been at the top her whole life, and this exam will be no different. She promises she'll make him understand the difference between their abilities. With that, she quickly leaves, followed by her partner. Light flashes on the professor's glasses as he announces Team 2 will start the exam. Kyle and his assistant watch them through a magical camera that follows them. As they drop in, Krista tells her partner to activate light magic. He says his detection magic found something, and she tells him to let her handle the landing and focus on finding targets. Krista cushions the fall using sand magic. Then the boy says he found 2 enemies 20 meters ahead, behind a pillar to the northwest. Arms crossed, Krista says, "Rise," and summons a bunch of soldiers full-on solo leveling style. The speed of her summoning shocks her partner, and even Rain and Logan, because it's not easy to create that many summons that fast. It intrigues Kyle and freaks the assistant professor out because of how strong she is. That's the Warden family bloodline magic, created by the second sage, Riet Warden. And even though it's a 2-star spell, the speed she uses it with is insane. Being able to perfectly control 12 summons at the same time at her age is just pure genius. Krista looks up, watching a monster get sliced in half. Her partner says he detected 3 more enemies in the hole to the left, and she says they should head over there. He says it's right there, but after walking for a long time, Krista gets annoyed and asks what he even meant by right there. He asks her to wait a second and warns her there was a monster among the rocks at 3 o'clock, another at 8 o'clock, and one on the ceiling right in front of them. She tells her shadows to attack, saying he should just leave this to her. In no time, the monsters get wiped out by her sand summons. Her partner is shocked at how fast she took down 3 enemies. Looking back, the girl asks what he was doing, and he says there was nothing over there. So she says they should keep moving. Outside, other students were watching them. They were talking about how the pair was moving through the maze like it was nothing. Freaked out by the girl's skill, our protagonist says being able to cast a 2-star spell with that kind of precision was seriously impressive. Logan says, well, obviously this is Krista they're talking about, the most promising genius of her generation. Rain asks if she's really that amazing, and the guide explains that even the school elders warned them to be careful around Krista. Even while fighting, Krista kept pushing herself, thinking it still wasn't enough. She remembers 2 mages talking about how high level her family was and saying it was only natural after all. Their current leader back then was the Dean of Delayton. Looking at the girl, still just a kid, one of the mages asks if she agrees. But then he wonders if her father was really worthy of being the leader, since he'd heard the guy barely managed to become a 2-star mage. So how could 2 families that once produced sages be so different? The mage in the black hood tells him to cut it out, but the red mage says he's just being honest. Putting a hand on the girl's shoulder, the red mage tells Krista to let her father know their family wasn't fit to be a house of mages, because that's what everyone said, and besides, even the girl's mother and her 2 sisters couldn't use magic. He says if she clings to all that, things will only get worse, so she should just leave the world of magic behind and live in peace. It'd be better for everyone. As she stumbled, the girl replayed those words in her head while taking out the 20th enemy. Looking at her partner, who is totally worn out, she asks what's next, and the guy asks for a break. But Krista says they don't have time for that, yanking him along with one of her summons. While dragging him, she tells him to just point out where the next enemies are. Outside, the students kept talking about how insane the performance was. The teacher thought it was chilling, he never expected she could handle magic at that level. Back in the past, the girl stood facing a light in the middle of the darkness, and the green mage asks if something's wrong. She tells him she's going to become the greatest mage of all time, so her mom, dad, and sisters won't look down on her anymore. Back in the present, taking enemies down one by one, Krista tells herself she's going to prove it. She swears she'll earn her honor and prestige with her own hands. Krista remembers that after she said that, the mage knelt down and told her he was counting on her to restore the Warden family once again. A monster that looks like a Zubat drops onto one of her summons and destroys it. She throws herself backward, dodging the attack, and summons another sand monster. Telling it to get back up, she sends it straight at the monster. The soldier ends up smashing the monster into the ground with a punch. 4 minutes have passed. The assistant professor announces that all magical reactions have disappeared. And just like that, Teen Q's exam is over, with a total time of 4 minutes and 13 seconds, finishing in under 5 minutes. Kyle says that's exactly what you'd expect from someone descended from a mage family. Then he declares Krista's grade is S. As Krista's group leaves the maze, the other students wonder how that's even possible. Most of them haven't even finished talking through their strategies yet. Logan already expected Krista to be talented, but not on that level. Now he gets why the elders have been watching her. It makes sense she's seen as a potential leader for the Magic City. The group stops in front of Kyle, who says that since he started teaching, their team is now second in the time rankings, finishing in under 5 minutes. Showing off, the girl says ending things with overwhelming power is just how her family does things. The professor thought the Warden family's strength was based up in the Highlands, and that they were hiding some huge reserve of stamina and magical power. Even though he planned his strategy around that, the girl's moves couldn't be explained by that alone. That result came from her insane effort. Her biggest advantage was that she was a genius who actually worked hard. Calling the girl and her partner over, the professor says it goes without saying, they passed. There were still a few students left, but he adds right away that their grade was an S. Krista clears her throat and, bowing, says he was too kind. He wishes her good luck, and she turns around, absolutely thrilled. As she walks past our protagonist, she looks at him, thinking, yeah, that's just who I am. Smiling, Rain tells Logan this might end up being more fun than he expected, and Logan agrees. Rain ends up having another flashback from back when he was still Lin. Esther says people used to call the place they were in the Southern Star because it was so beautiful, but now it didn't even come close. Freedy, sitting down, asks what the plan is, since going into that fog is basically guaranteed death. Our protagonist agrees, and the silver-haired leader complains that she's hungry. After thinking for a bit, Esther tells Lin to destroy everything. He says he gets it, but then, realizing what she actually means, he turns around and asks what the hell she's doing. Wasn't the city a cultural heritage site? Esther says yes. In that case, Lin says we need to preserve the original shape so we can fix it later. Kyle and Freed laugh, and he asks if they're seriously messing with him. Striking a pose, Esther explains to Lin that there are times in life when you just dive in head first and deal with the consequences later. He asks what she's even talking about. Freedy agrees with Esther, and Lin tells her to shut up. Blushing, Free smiles and says that, to her, he matters more than any cultural heritage site, and that as the leader, she'll take the blame later. Clenching her fists, Esther says that if she has to, she'll use her fists too. Seeing how determined Esther is, our protagonist asks if the problem is really that simple, and she says she hates complicated problems. Forming a magic circle in his hand, he says he gets it and that he won't care about what they'll have to deal with afterward. It's crazy how one irresponsible decision can change the world. Back in the present, Rain says he's made up his mind. Saying he's got a great idea, he tells Logan to come closer. Logan asks if Rain is messing with him, because that could get them disqualified. Rain just says he'll take responsibility if anything happens. Logan scratches his head, worried, and says that even if they just took it easy, they'd still pass, but it wouldn't be fun at all. Rain smiles, realizing his point worked. Just then, Krista, who'd been listening, asks what they're doing and why they might get disqualified. Rain asks if she's scared and tells her to just wait and see what they're about to do. She asks what they even mean by all that. This is an exam, not playtime, so they should take it seriously. Turning to her, Rain says that supposedly magic is meant to be fun. Doesn't she think so too? Prep time is over, and the professor tells the teams to get ready. Realizing they're out of time, the teams rush to enter the labyrinth. But Rain, totally calm, walks up to the professor and calls out to him. He asks if the students' safety inside is guaranteed, and the professor says yes. Since he's controlling everything with magic, nobody's life will be in danger. Then Rain asks if Logan heard that and says they should go ahead with the plan. The assistant professor announces that 9 minutes have passed and there's only 1 minute left. Rain asks if Logan's ready, pulling off his shirt. Logan calmly says he only needs 7 seconds. In that case, Rain says, I'm counting on you. Remembering his adventure with his companions, he summons his magic and says he's going to blow everything up. They crank their magic up to the max, declaring that the exam is finally about to begin. Krista and her partner are stunned, wondering if they're seriously not going into the labyrinth. Kyle notices something. What's in Rain's eyes is the Ludwig family's magic bell Situs, the one that lets you see through all magic. Just the fact that he can use it at 16 puts him beyond even his family's genius level. Still, Kyle wonders what the kid is about to do, just standing there. At that moment, the boy finally finishes detecting all the monsters inside the labyrinth. After that, he uses magic to link up, and Logan gets ready to throw a punch. Seeing this, the professor can't help but be surprised. Rain gives Logan the signal to attack, and the very next second Logan slams his fist into the ground with insane force, shattering it. Shielding herself from the powerful shockwave, Krista calls him an idiot, saying he just blocked the entrance. Kyle then realizes that, considering how strong that punch was, the effect was way too small. But when he looks closer, he notices something. Rain still had the spell active, then a crack starts spreading toward the back of the labyrinth. Inside, beneath every monster, a circle forms. Rain smiles, and the next moment, the monsters get crushed like cockroaches, and everyone nearby ends up losing their balance because of the earthquake it causes. Krista's left wondering what the heck just happened. Freaked out, the assistant professor asks if that was an earthquake, while Kyle wonders if it was some kind of magical reaction. Brushing dust off his clothes, Kyle asks his assistant if there was any magical reaction inside the labyrinth, but when the assistant checks, he panics at what he sees. He calls out to Kyle, and Kyle, confused, asks what's going on, reminding him there's only 1 minute left. That's when a man tells him that when he checked the labyrinth's status, he couldn't find a single monster. The professor is even more shocked because it hadn't even been a minute. Scratching his neck, the assistant says that can't be right. Kyle asks why, and the guy explains it doesn't make sense. The whole point was to test skills in the labyrinth, but destroying everything goes against what the exam is supposed to be, and having no monsters left alive is basically just luck, so it should be invalid. And an S rank is supposed to mean a perfect result, but in this case, it was total chaos. After thinking for a bit, Kyle tells his assistant that geniuses are usually nowhere near perfect. Perfect is some state that matches all the world's ideals, but geniuses who change the world always break those ideals. A genius isn't someone who fits into perfection. If anything, they create a new kind of perfection. Xammer asks what the professor means by that, and Kyle explains that if they followed the traditional method, Rain and Logan were far from perfect. But then he asks Zemar if he'd ever even considered destroying the labyrinth. The man says no, but that if he wanted to, he could. Kyle says that's the point. The boys created a new path. Being able to think of and actually do something nobody else would, that's what matters most. It's about having the knowledge and understanding to turn a stupid idea into reality. Watching the boys smiling, the professor tells his assistant to just wait because that student is going to become the center of the magical world and push its boundaries. 40 minutes later, the test is over. Kyle says the results will be posted and tells the students to go take a look. In the hardest test of the year, most of the applicants who pass finish in 30 minutes. A lot of students either drained their magic completely or got hurt because they lost control of their magic. On top of that, some students had to retake the test after getting hit more than 3 times by a target. Krista and Rumlow's team finished in 4 minutes and 13 seconds, an insane result. In that case, an S rank made total sense. But Logan and Rain's team finished in under 1 minute, so the girls' evaluation dropped to an A rank. Krista ends up having another flashback, where everyone was saying that apparently the Warden family's daughter could use 2-star magic at age 6. They thought it was great news, because for the Warden family, who were basically on the edge of collapse, it was a huge relief. Then they stopped paying attention to the girls showing off fiercely, and start asking about the Ludwig family's situation. People talk about the so-called Prince of Disaster, saying they feel bad for him, but also that it's not their problem, and they're just glad he's not part of their family. Krista was always picking on Rain because he didn't care what people said about him, but he never cared about what she said either. Still, on the day they were about to enter the academy, Rain ends up saving her. Even her tutor praised him for how fast he activated his magic. With all that, she couldn't help wondering what had happened because he didn't seem that strong during the family gathering. Her tutor was also curious why he was there, since the entrance exam had already started. Krista asks if she couldn't just let it slide that he showed up late, and then Carolina asks since when she ever cared about the other students. Right then, the girl says that, just like her teacher had noticed before, having him around was going to heat things up. She also asks if a little competition wouldn't be good for the school. She was finally taking all of it seriously. In that moment, she declares the boy is going to be her rival. But the result of that exam completely crushes her. Her partner, Rumlow, walks up to her thanking her, because he got a good grade thanks to her. Krista, though, just stands there frozen, wondering if she really lost again, especially to someone who treated magic like it was no big deal. She's annoyed she didn't think to destroy the maze, but then she realizes that even if she had thought of it, she wouldn't have been able to. Watching her, Kyle realizes she's super competitive. He gets that feeling. He thinks it's a good thing, but in his head he comments that if Krista keeps chasing after Rain, she's in for a rough, thorny road. With a sigh, he adjusts his glasses. He gets everyone's attention and says that normally only one team should get an S rank evaluation. But since the teams were made based on points, Logan and Rain ended up on the same team, which wasn't fair. So he announces that both teams will receive an S rank evaluation. All the students are happy, but Krista is still frustrated about everything. Rain walks up to her and says it looks like it ended in a tie. He reaches out his hand to shake hers, but she slaps his hand away. Everyone watching is confused. Then Krista asks if he seriously thinks she'd be satisfied with that result. Rain is confused and asks why she wouldn't be after all. They both got S rank. Yelling, she tells him not to mess with her, because she only got that evaluation out of pity. Anxiety takes over, and while she begs people not to look at her, Krista runs off. Rain calls after her, trying to stop her, but he can't. He turns to Logan and asks if he said something wrong. Logan says he's sure he didn't, but since he's from one of the 8 magic schools, he doesn't really get all this magic clan stuff. Noticing how weird Logan is acting, Rain asks what he knows, because it's obvious he's lying. Logan then repeats stuff people say, like, the Warden family is done for, and that cursed magic clan. Hearing that, Rain asks why he'd say something like that. Logan explains that it's what everyone says. All the Warden glory is in the past, and until Krista was born, the Warden family didn't have what it took to be considered a magic clan. Krista was the one who brought the family back and got them recognized as a magic clan again. She did it on her own. And since she'd been carrying the family by herself up to now, she's probably full of built-up frustration. Somewhere deep in the forest, Krista is crouched down, crying. Hearing the boy's footsteps, she stands up. She says magic clans and mages are supposed to be respected, almost worshipped, because people look at them with huge expectations, so they can't become someone others can treat like trash. But all of that hurts Krista. Frustrated, she says she's given everything she has to get here since she was 6, and she still barely made it this far. And yet some kid with no bloodline or famous last name went and stained the clan's honor by accepting that duel. On top of that, Rain talks to everyone like it's nothing. No hesitation at all. Krista yells that she doesn't get what he means when he says magic is something you do for fun because none of this is fun to her. Summoning a spell, she demands to know why, even though she takes it so seriously. His evaluation was higher than hers. Rain calmly disperses the sand summon she created. He says he loves magic, and when it works the way he pictured it, all the pain and effort feel like they just vanish. That's something only people who really work for it can understand, but it's not all fun and games. As Rain admits he's been through a lot of pain and despair, Krista lunges at him, creating another summon. Blocking her magic, he says she's her clan's last hope, and that she's trained so hard she's at the level of someone much older he can't even imagine how much pain she's had to endure. But one thing is for sure, thoughtfully, Rain says it looks like this is the first time she's ever actually succeeded with that spell. Tears fall down her face when she hears that. Krista looked pissed, but the boy just kept talking, telling her that all that misery and responsibility wasn't hers and that she could have just tossed it all away. Even so, she didn't give up, and he asked her why. Summoning another huge stone monster, Krista tells him to shut up. Our protagonist stands his ground and asks if it's because she can't forget what happened. Not wanting to hear him, Krista tells him to shut up again and smacks him with her summoned attack. As she does, she remembers when she was little, how happy she was just for beating a wheat training dummy. Still standing after her hit, Rain says she's strong, and no matter what she did, nobody would dare go against her. Krista bursts into tears, and our protagonist says that, in that case, she should feel the joy of magic again. Wiping her face, Krista gets up and tells him to stop showing off because it's seriously starting to annoy her. He says he's earned the right to show off, since he's the one who won this time, leaving her with nothing to say. Then Rain adds that it'd been a while since he felt like that. Holding out his hand, he says that's what he expects from his rival. He says that thanks to her, he actually had fun, and that he'll be counting on her in the next test. That finally pulls a smile out of her. She'd been all tears just a moment ago. A little red in the face, Krista slaps him and tells him to stop showing off. Hurrying out of there, she warns him not to get cocky just because he won, because next time she's going to crush his ego. Rubbing his face, our protagonist complains about how hard she hit him. As she runs, Krista apologizes to her father, but she's already decided what path she's going to take. Kyle explains to his assistant that talent shows up in different ways, which leaves the guy confused. So the teacher explains that sometimes it comes from motivation like classmates, the desire to overcome some huge wall, or even a friend you can rely on. Watching the students, he says things are going to get complicated from here on out, and his assistant asks if it can really get any worse. Smiling, Kyle says he's finally sure he made the right call becoming a teacher at DeLayton. But now they need to start again, so he tells his helper to call the students. Back at DeLayton, the students are told there won't be afternoon classes during the exam season. In the hallway, Logan asks why Rain's face is swollen, and Rain says he's imagining things. Changing the subject, Rain says that if they've got the whole afternoon free, they should go to the training hall. Logan asks if he isn't tired, they just finished an exam. Opening the door, Rain says that's exactly why he needs to train. But then they run into Owen waiting for them, saying it's good they've got energy to spare. Pointing at a stack of papers, the teacher says he prepared 150 questions for the math test, so it'll be great practice. And since there's a written test after that, they're not allowed back to the dorms until they finish. Get inside, Logan wonders why he's even involved in this. Putting on an innocent face, Owen says Logan can go home if he wants and stay as long as he likes making Logan change his mind instantly. Calling over all the students who were there, the teacher says they're included too. The students complain that they're exhausted, and the teacher asks if he needs to repeat himself. As Rain grabs his portion, he looks at Krista. She looks like a zombie, and the teacher says that until a little while ago, he thought she left early. But she came up to him full of energy, so he gave her a few extra questions to do. Krista hears that and yells, asking if he's messing with her. Owen says he's not, and that she shouldn't even think about doing only half, because the written test will affect her grade. The students keep nonstop complaining about the test. Meanwhile, the teacher calls them primates, and says if he hears one more conversation, they're getting kicked out of the room. Rain figures they're testing whether they can still answer correctly while tired, but that number of questions is insane. They'd solved that kind of problem more times than he could count, so this was basically an endurance test. Activating his bell Sidious, he decides to cheat a little. 10 minutes later, Rain says he's finished. Omen says he'd finished really fast and that if Rain was that confident, he should just hand in his answers and go back to the dorm. Right then, someone asks if Rain is actually confident. It's Krista. She's dead tired and says that if he's rushing like that, there's no way his score will be higher than hers. Rain comments that she looks completely wiped. Owen snaps at her, asking if she doesn't know how to stay quiet during a test, and she apologizes. Rain stands up and, as he walks toward the exit, decides to check how Logan is doing, and he realizes the guy looks totally lost and nowhere near finishing. As he closes the door, Rain thinks he should go take a shower. The next moment, someone walks out through the door, a red-headed girl who immediately catches Rain's eye. Her blazing red hair burned like fire, and her eyes looked like they could see through anything along with this deep darkness in them. That was his first meeting with Lily and Karian. She'd been considered the best student after the war of the 8 great schools. A little later, at the academy, Rain asks Logan who the red-headed girl is and whether he knows her. Logan says he does, and asks why Rain is bringing her up out of nowhere. Rain says he just felt like talking about it. Drying his face with a towel, Rain says he saw her in the hallway and her vibe felt weird. He asks what kind of person she is, and Logan gets a little tense about answering. After thinking for a bit, Logan admits the girl is basically Rivendell School's secret weapon. He also says Lillian's been the target of rumors ever since she arrived at the academy. Rain remembers Rivendell is a school known for fire specialists. Logan says that, like Rain probably guessed, her red hair is a sign she's blessed by the flames, and her affinity with fire is way above normal. Because of that, among the 8 great schools, she's known as the rival of the genius Krista Warden, and people usually call her a monster. He adds that even the elders say she has the potential to become an archmage. Rain asks if that isn't kind of an exaggeration, and Logan says it's not baseless. She really is that strong. After a moment of silence, Rain thanks him, saying it helped a lot, and Logan, drinking some water, says he's glad. Then Rain suddenly turns and says Logan seems to know a lot about her, and asks if he's got a crush on her or something. Logan spits out his water, and Rain keeps going, saying they'd make a great couple and he'll be rooting for him. Logan asks if Rain seriously thinks that, and Rain, with a goofy smile, says yep. Rain thinks about what Logan said about her being a secret weapon and concludes he doesn't get a single minute of peace in DeLayton. At the start of Red Ridge, on day 4 of the exams, the boys are standing in front of a barrier. They say it looks like a 4-star barrier. Zimmer starts explaining that the test will take place in a fantasy world, and they'll be split into a group of 60, the teams A, B, and C. Rain figures that by fantasy world, the teacher means inside the barrier. The teacher also explains the test will be a battle royale. That confuses everyone except the teachers, who look bored. He says there will be hidden treasures, and every time they find one, they get 1 point. On top of that, there will be magical creatures created by illusions, and defeating them will earn points too. The points depend on how hard they are, and the students will have to choose whether to fight or run. Zimar asks if they have any questions, and Krista immediately raises her hand. She asks if the test is basically about who collects the most treasure and takes down the most monsters, because that doesn't sound like a battle royale at all. The teacher says she can think of it that way. But there's another rule. They're allowed to attack opponents and steal their points. They're also allowed to steal monsters, treasures, and whatever else. And if they want, they can even send their classmates to meet their maker. That last part leaves everyone stunned. Then someone taps a cane on the ground, getting everyone's attention. It's Marhina. She explains that since it's a world made of magic, everything that happens inside it is just an illusion. Basically, no matter how serious an attack is, they won't actually injure them. They'll still feel pain though. And if their bodies get destroyed or they die, once it's all over, they'll return to their real bodies like nothing happened. So, she says, in that case, they can go all out. The teacher also explains that the evaluation method was simple. The 2 people who racked up the most points would get S rank, and there weren't any other criteria. Hearing the woman's explanation, the students with not so nice intentions start thinking it was basically just a matter of beating everyone up. Marhina says that Emitsa, the creator of that magic, once said that making it possible for people to dream in that world was a mage's duty. And the most important thing to fulfill that duty was skill. In the world of magic, past and future skill belong to the best of the best, so they had to show what they could do. She says she'll start announcing the teams, starting with Team A, made up of Hubert, Logan, and Krista. Happy with her team, Krista says she finally had a test worth taking seriously, and Rain, hearing that, asks if she hadn't taken the previous tests seriously, because she even cried when she lost. Embarrassed, the girl plays dumb and asks who told him she cried. Gertrude, watching the whole thing, smiles at the situation. Krista says Rain should stay focused and make sure he gets an S rank, because only she is worthy of stealing his spot. She says she won't accept him losing to anyone but her, and the boys keep laughing at the scene, which just makes her mad. Zimmer then announces that Team A's test is about to begin. Moving on to Team B, the group would be Gertrude, Lillian, and Rain. In front of the barrier, Gertrude clenches her fists, trying to stay calm. Noticing that, Rain asks if she's nervous, which ends up startling her. She denies it with everything she's got, saying he has to be joking, and that he's the one who should be nervous. Our protagonist asks why he should be nervous, and she says it's obvious because he's on the same team as her, and if Rain tried anything with her, he'd be done for. Waving his hand, the guy smiles and says that won't happen. Turning to the girl behind him, Rain asks what the redhead wants with him, since she'd been standing there for a while. She says she has something to talk to him about and asks if he's free. Rain says that if it's something interesting, then yeah. With Krista, we see her golem fighting fiercely against a giant octopus. A message beeps, letting her know she's reached 280 points, and she thinks that still isn't enough, while she wonders how many points Rain is going to get. She notices movement in the bushes behind her and, snapping her fingers, summons 2 sand warriors, who capture 2 girls trying to ambush her. Serious, Krista asks if they really thought they could beat her by teaming up, and the girls say no and beg her to spare them. Krista just lets them go, and as the girls run off, she says beating them wouldn't be worth enough points, and that next time they should fight fair. The people watching from outside comment that someone who could control a 2-star spell at that age, like that, was impressive. They also talked about Hubert, who managed to reach 253 points thanks to his amazing wind control. In third place was Logan, with 249 points. He was wrecking everything in front of him, kind of rough around the edges, but his strength was no joke. Professor Kyle comments that, as expected, those 3 were dominating, and Zimar says they had something different about them. Marhina, meanwhile, says they're just the opening act. Elin has her hands under her chin, looking like she's waiting for something. Back where Rain is, Lillian says she's never lost before. That leaves Rain confused about what she means. The Reddit explains that since she's never been beaten, if she loses now, she's going to get punished badly, and she asks why the boy hid his power. Our protagonist says he never hid his power, he just didn't have a reason to use it. Lillian says that, apparently, he's the typical young master from some powerful family. Gertrude asks if the girl isn't from a prestigious family too, and if so, why she's calling Rain young master. Lillian asks what she means by a prestigious family. After all, she's not the one who deserves that title, they can just call her a tool. Our protagonist asks why tool, and she explains that she wasn't born from her parents' love, she was made for a single purpose. Her father was Deedon, the headmaster of Rivendell School, and since she was young, she'd been locked in a room, forced to learn magic, and never allowed to go out. On top of that, if she didn't get good grades, she'd be beaten until she passed out. For example, her father could take her mother into the room and throw hot water on her. That freaks Gertrude out, hearing all that, and the girl keeps going, saying that since her dad was a fire master, he knew how to hurt someone without leaving serious injuries. Rain thinks that's nothing like Osirius Academy and wonders if she didn't graduate at the top, her dad would do it again. But the girl said she'd personally send him to hell if he tried. Gertrude figures the girl's father was a 4-star mage and wonders if that means she could actually beat someone on that level. Walking past them, Lillian reveals her plan was to graduate from Delayton with insane grades, earn everyone's recognition, and kick her father out. She says she's basically just warning them not to get in her way. The pink-haired girl says it's all pretty interesting, but Lillian should just give up, because she studies at the same school as Krista, the genius the whole world recognizes. Hearing that, Lillian says Krista Warden means no more to her than an ant. That makes Gertrude furious, so she steps up to Lillian and asks if she seriously just called Krista an ant. Keeping that total too cool attitude, Lillian mocks her and asks if she said anything wrong. Then Rain jumps in, saying he can understand why Lillian's so desperate. He looks at Gertrude and asks her to calm down. Lillian silently looks back as she walks away. The protagonist says that, no matter what, he's not giving up on being a top student, because he's got a friend waiting for him. The crimson-haired girl says she already explained her reasons and gave him a warning, but if he keeps insisting on staying in her way, she'll have no choice but to eliminate him. Right then, they announce that Group A's test is over. In Team A's test, Krista and Huberto scored 361 and 338, and both got S rank. Gertrude greets Krista with a towel, congratulating her on all the hard work, and Krista, totally exhausted, says it felt like going out for a run. Since the first group's test is done, Kyle says it's time for Team B. The students have to choose where they'll start. Rain wonders where he should start. Mountains E and F are the biggest, with tons of monsters and treasure, so they're popular picks. Zones B and C are the mountain peaks. They give you a great view, but there's the risk of getting surrounded by other students. The forest zones D and E are great for hiding, but it's hard to keep a good lookout, and they're kind of terrible for scoring points. In Rain's case, he already has a specific spot in mind that fits what he wants. Then they're told to keep their chosen starting point in mind after deciding. Krista says it's Gertrude's turn, and Gertrude says it'll be easy. Before she leaves, Krista calls out to her, telling her to give it everything she's got. Gertrude smiles and says she will, then disappears in a flash of teleport light. Keen Bee's dimensional transfer finishes, and the test is about to begin. Caroline tells Ellen it's Rain's turn. Yulin thinks the criteria Marhena set are pretty simple: mobility, information gathering, and combat ability. It's a basic exam that tests the most fundamental talents a mage should have. She's sure Rain is going to leave her speechless. Just like Krista, Lillian also chooses Area F to start, and people notice how confident she is. It's the most dangerous area, but that danger comes with a ton of points, and starting there also makes it easier to move into other zones. Compared to Lillian, Zigger says Rain's chosen area is pretty modest, more like a safe, steady way to rack up points while avoiding fights. Carol says it doesn't seem like a bad choice. Caroline says it's boring. She was hyped to see the kid run into Lillian in Area F. Yulin asks if watching him is making her bored, and Caroline says yeah, because the kid can beat post-index mages from the 8 schools, but he still acts like this. Then Rain runs into a girl in the middle of the forest. Everyone's happy, because he finally found a fight. Caroline wonders what he's about to show them. She's curious what someone who earned an S-rank evaluation can really do. But, shocking everyone and even the girl fighting him, Rain just turns around and takes off running while she's casting her spell. That frustrates Caroline and makes Ellen literally fall out of her chair. Watching him run, her aunt has to be held back, furious, yelling about how he can just run away in the middle of a battle. With her arms crossed, Krista wondered if the boy really wanted an S-rank evaluation. One of the teachers burst out laughing, saying Scalzi's grandson was pretty weird. Zigger asked if this was really the time to laugh, and the teacher asked what the problem was because honestly, things had just gotten way more interesting. Marhena noticed the boy was saving his energy, like he was planning something big. She wondered how he was going to make up for the points he'd lost. 40 minutes had gone by, and compared to Keen A, the top score was lower, but still solid. In the stands, people were asking who was in the lead. Right then, a boy was holding a jewel in his hands. Suddenly it vanished, and when he looked behind him, he saw it in Gertrude's hands, who was currently in first place. Caroline thought, yeah, that's so like her. Then a monster caught Gertrude off guard, trying to attack her from behind, but it got taken down fast. Caroline in her head thought Gertrude was always hiding in Krista's shadow, but no doubt she was an amazing mage. Carol asked Zigger what place Lillian was in, and when he checked, he realized she wasn't even in the top 20. On top of that, he said she was actually dead last, with a total of 0 points. She'd been meditating since the start of the exam, which made him wonder what her strategy even was. Krista was chasing a lizard, and she nailed it by casting a fireball. That's when she ran into Lillian, who was standing completely still, like she hadn't even noticed Krista was there. Zigger commented that maybe she just didn't care about her score. As for Rain, he was in 13th place and only fought monsters when he had to. The fact he'd gotten that far mostly by collecting treasures was kited insane. Seeing Rain was in Zone C, a mountainous area, Carolyn said he looked like he had experience in the mountains. And Ellen joked the kid must have been a monkey in a past life, but at that pace, he wouldn't reach the top, so she wondered what he was thinking. Then rain started falling from the sky onto the students. Everyone looked up, happy about it. The weather was perfect for monsters with sharp hearing. It was the perfect time to start hunting. Just then, a few fireballs appeared over a mountain. It was Lillian. Apparently, she finally decided to move. Still meditating, she ordered the fireballs to find everyone in the top 10 highest scores. Behind her, a volcano erupted, and as she gathered aura, she walked forward slowly, saying it was time to begin. Then the students were warned that the volcano was active, and they needed to evacuate the affected area. That battle royale wasn't the kind of test you could survive to the end just by hiding. With volcanic eruptions, the safe zones kept changing, and eventually, the students would have to fight each other. Some hooded people commented that, just like expected, the group in front was starting to pick up momentum. Logan said if the group hadn't lost their rhythm, the result would have been different, and Krista said the problem was they lacked finesse. Right then, one of the hooded figures told them to wait, noticing someone moving at an insane speed. It was Rain Ludwig, still boosting his score like crazy. Marhena told them to put a camera on the boy. When they switched it on, he was standing in the middle of a bunch of stone spikes, with monster corpses scattered all around him. Ellen was on edge, because the boy was finally about to start moving. Inside a cave, water droplets fell into a small pool. A monster walked up to drink. Then it noticed a fight and ran toward it. Rain's ranking dropped almost like a countdown. Marheta said he was a really interesting kid. Logan asked what the hell was going on, and Krista explained the boy was using vibrations to lure the monsters in. That left Logan confused, and Krista thought that, in the end, This was what Rain had been planning from the start. The boy fought hard, barely dodging a monster's claw. The monsters closed in, and he thought it was time. He created a magic circle and cast a spell into the ground. And just like that, he skewered all the monsters at once. Krista and Logan were confused because he was using trees to take them down. Kyle thought there weren't any trees in that area, so he must have planned it from the beginning. One of the hooded figures checked the boy's hunting score and saw it had already hit 164. Caroline, breaking into a cold sweat, said it was impressive he could cast 3-star magic that fast while dealing with that many monsters. Bragging about her nephew, Ellen said that was nothing for him. With a total of 362 points including Team A, the kid was sitting at the top. After grinding aura, he leaves the area, saying that should be enough and that it was time to stop. Kyle thinks that field was basically covered in lava. On top of that, most of the treasures and monsters were gone, so it looked like Gertrude wouldn't be able to pass Rain. Right then, Zigger calls him over, and when Kyle asks, "What's up?" the guy says 2 students' names had disappeared. He asks if it's a bug, and Kyle says that can't be. Zigger shows him, and the teacher realizes it's not a joke. Kyle thinks something was off about the people behind them, and even if they'd lost their spots, this wasn't normal. At least not in the top 10 or even the top 20. So he asks one of the hooded staff to show where the students in 30th and 40th place were 3 minutes ago. When they pull up the recording from 3 minutes earlier, a massive fire spell is burning one of the students. The teachers freak out at what they're seeing. With the second student, the girl tries to defend herself, but she gets hit almost immediately by a second spell, and the last thing she does is curse out whoever took her down. The teachers are frozen, pure terror written all over their faces. Rain keeps falling, and the girl calmly walks on, planning to take them out one by one. If she beat first or second place, that would already be enough. Caroline and Ellen, terrified, admit the girl is insanely strong. Marhana says that with a personality like that, she's even more dangerous. Watching the rankings, Gertrude wonders when Rain managed to pass her. She also notices Lillian right on her tail, and that 20th and 30th place had vanished. Just then, a bird made of fire comes flying at her, and the girl sighs, saying she has no idea what's going on here. The spell knocks down the tree she's on, and she barely avoids getting hit too. As she falls, she wonders where those flames even came from. But before she can make sense of it, another spell comes straight at her. The attack slams her hard into the ground, and Krista, watching the fight, starts to worry. Lillian calmly walks up and notices there isn't a single trace of ash. Suddenly, Gertrude throws a kick, and Lillian barely manages to dodge. They both summon magic to defend themselves, and a clash of water and fire forms. The fact that the fight is so evenly matched gets Krista excited. This is definitely a fair fight. Lillian asks if she should get serious this time, unlike before, and Gertrude says it's too late for her to regret it now. Tossing a leaf into the air, the redhead says it looks like she'll have to try a different approach than before. She creates a giant firebird, forcing Gertrude to work really hard just to defend herself. Gertrude says that no matter how hard she tries, the result will be the same. Then Lillian snaps the necklace she's wearing and little spheres fly everywhere. Krista realizes it's a rosary. Caroline is surprised the girl is using that. Rivendell Academy was famous for having mid-tier mages who used talismans to set up magic circles, quickly calculating shapes and rune-like writing to maximize the effect in combat when time was tight. Looking up, Gertrude sees that Lillian has created a bunch of flame insects. Clenching her fists, Lillian uses the flame insect line. Then a swarm of fiery insects rushes at Gertrude, who defends herself with water magic. An explosion goes off right there, and Lillian stays standing, listening to the crackle of embers, until a hole opens in the flames, and Gertrude bursts out, trying to nail her with a kick. But again, Lillian dodges, like she was expecting it. With another talisman in hand, the girl says Gertrude's end has come. But Gertrude takes a tree, launching it up toward her. Krista cheers, and Gertrude charges at Lillian, who greets her with a blast of fire. Gertrude easily dodges, jumping with her water magic. She uses the boost to try a flying kick. Ellen is impressed that Lillian manages to dodge that too, making Gertrude slam into the ground. Even while she's still in the air, Lillian is prepping another talisman, and Ellen says that from where Gertrude is, she's about to take a direct hit. But when everyone thinks the fight is over, Gertrude creates a magic circle on the ground. That catches Lillian off guard, and with a little smirk, Gertrude creates something like a geyser. Realizing it's a water vein, Kai says the girl's seriously skilled since she'd been planning that from the start. Just like you'd expect from the Fetton family known for water magic and martial arts, the girl was using her strengths like a pro. This time, Lillian picked the wrong opponent, pinning the girl to the ground. Gertrude says that if she tries to challenge a young lady again without knowing her place, she'll be happy to crush that arrogant pride of hers. Krista, please, pats Logan on the shoulder. Gertrude points out the girl's clothes are soaked and says that, in that case, her talismans are useless. She says she'll give her one chance if she doesn't want her arm broken, she should give up. Lillian smiles, saying Gertrude is pretty naive, because if it were her in Gertrude's place, she'd have already ended her life. With a cold look, Gertrude says it looks like she chose the hard way, and without hesitating, she quickly breaks the girl's arm. After lying on the ground for a while, Lillian explains that the reason she used talismans wasn't because her calculations were slow. With a talisman on her tongue, she reveals the real reason. She couldn't control her own strength. A bright glow spills out of her mouth. It startles Gertrude, who quickly backs away. Staggering, Lillian gets up, and around her there are several fire insects. Then she gathers them all together, forming an intense light that blinds Gertrude. And when Gertrude looks again, the insects have turned into a massive serpent right in front of her. With a wave of her hand, Lillian orders the serpent to devour the girl. Gertrude wonders how that's even possible, and admits she wasn't expecting it to reach that level. A fire serpent, the biggest summon among the divine fire beasts that Rivendell's school prides itself on. They say this summon was the main one used by the school's founder, the great mage Karain. The serpent was infamous for being extremely picky about choosing its master. Even so, it looked like it was only at about 30% power, since it wasn't fully formed. Ellen comments that, even then, it's insane for a 16-year-old to summon something like that. Shaken, Krista wonders if there's even a way to beat it. Almost like she heard her, Gertrude says that's the real problem. The next moment, the giant serpent roars and spits out a blast of fire. Gertrude barely manages to dodge, but the flames catch her cloak. Putting out the fire on her clothes, she wonders when that flame even hit her. Looking around, she realizes the sheer destruction the fire left behind. The stones hadn't just melted, they turned to ash. Stunned, Gertrude, Krista, and Logan realize that's the serpent's real power. An explosion goes off somewhere else in the forest. Over there, a girl is running from a monster when the fire blast hits it. The hooded figures comment that the serpent is circling around Gertrude. So Gertrude has been marked as its target, and it looks like Lillian plans to take this all the way. Zigger asks Kyle if the girl isn't crossing the line already. Even if it doesn't kill her right away, the pain would be brutal, and if she gets hit by those flames, she might end up seriously traumatized. So he asks if it wouldn't be better to stop the test, and Kyle asks Marhana what she thinks. The woman raises her hand and says she agrees that's probably the best call. But then she notices Rain up in a tree, above a forest that's on fire. During his training, Rain's grandfather had told him that with the mana he had at the time, his limit was 3 uses total. But that depended on the level of the mage he was trying to interfere with. He said that if Rain hit his mana limit and tried to force it anyway, he'd end up completely wiped out. In other words, he had to pick the right moment to use it. Back in the present, Rain watches everything from the top of the tree. Thinking he's already secured enough points, he decides to look for somewhere safe. Because after that group attack, his mana was almost gone, and there was no reason to take risks right now. But at the same time, putting himself in the girl's shoes, he can't just stand there. So he jumps from the branch he's on, activating Belsidius. Rain notices the magic circle in the formula has 5 triangles, with runes written inside them, set up to detect someone approaching. As he drops, the boy studies Lillian's magic. His eyes are bleeding from the strain. After fighting Logan and the Spider Queen, he'd noticed that every time he pushed past a barrier, his control improved. And the stronger the enemy, the faster he got closer to 6, star magic. Seeing the girl about to be attacked, Rain thinks it wasn't meant for her, it was meant for him, and that she shouldn't fool herself. The next moment, he dispelled the magic heading toward her. That leaves everyone in shock. Even Gertrude herself, despite part of her body being on fire, just stands there frozen. Lillian panics, because the fire serpent is gone. Helping other people in this exam didn't give you any reward, and with time limits and limited resources, it made it even weirder. But what almost nobody knew was that the test also judged whether participants would go beyond their own self-interest. Watching the boy, Marhana wonders if this was Scalzi's doing. She smiles and says the boy would definitely score really high. Spitting blood, Rain realizes canceling a 5, star spell took more mana than he expected. It was over, but now he felt empty like a drained container. Gertrude, sitting on the ground, calls out to Rain. When he sees she's still there, he asks what she's doing and tells her to run away as fast as she can. Lillian is standing there, her mind racing. She thinks the Fenton family magic doesn't suit her, because she doesn't have enough mana to summon the serpent again. And the serpent disappearing was definitely that boy's fault. She wonders if he's really going to interfere again. As she walks toward him, she thinks that whether he stopped the serpent or not, if he's defenseless right now, she has to beat him to become the top scorer. Then she summons another fire serpent, but its size catches the hooded observer's attention because it looks way smaller. Rain barely dodges the attack. Even smaller, the firepower is still terrifying. Seeing the boy about to get hit, Ellen yells for him to be careful. Just as Lillian is about to strike, Gertrude appears behind her. Lillian turns around but takes a magic charge punch to the stomach. She goes flying, trying to soften the impact with her magic. Rain is surprised he didn't expect the girl to come back to save him. He asks why she came back, and Gertrude says it's because she's his opponent, and if he got expelled, her lady Krista would fall apart from sadness. Hearing that from outside, Krista turns red as a tomato. People start whispering, and Krista tries to explain they're just rivals. Nervous, Logan just gives a thumbs up, and Krista asks if he wants to die. He says they look good together, and losing her patience, she slaps him across the face. Logan ends up on the ground, and embarrassed, Krista thinks that once the exam ends, Gertrude's life will come to an end. But either way, she thinks Rain was the only one who managed to stop the fire serpent. People said that if you mastered the Ludwig bloodline magic, you could fully control all magic. But in 1,000 years of history, only 3 people ever reached that level, and even then, from what she'd seen, they only managed it when they were already old, badly hurt. Gertrude tells the boy to leave, because this is between her and Lillian. Rain says she's injured and in really bad shape, but she insists she's fine, and that she still hasn't finished Lillian off. And she adds, honestly, he was in that girl's way. Before leaving, Rain asks her not to die. Gertrude says, obviously that's not going to happen. Lillian walks up to Gertrude and, spitting blood, tells her to move. Gertrude laughs, Lillian's the one who started this, and now she's telling her to get out of the way. The red-haired girl says all obstacles need to be removed. She lunges forward with her tongue out, like the serpent's spirit had fused with her. Gertrude, on the other hand, moves in calmly, like ocean waves. The collision is brutal. In the forest, Rain runs off to hide, but something almost hits him, and he barely manages to dodge. Zigger asks what that was. That's where Rain notices it's a group of low-level students who teamed up, hoping to ambush him and take him down. He's completely drained physically and magically, and that's really bad. Smiling, he says that in the end, they're just low-ranked students. And he asks if they really think they can beat him when even Logan couldn't, and that if they back off, he'll let them leave in peace. One of the boys says he's right, Rain really is strong. But then, he asks why someone as strong as Rain is trying to negotiate with them. Summoning a lightning spell, one of the students charges at Rain. Rain blocks the attack with a staff. While they're locked in a strength struggle, the guy asks who Rain thinks they are and says he probably can't even move anymore, so he should just give up. With a sigh, Ellen says there are always people like that, no matter where you go. Caroline says Ellen shouldn't look at it that way after all. It's just strategy. The staff the guy was using as a weapon ends up snapping in half, and he realizes he can't underestimate the low ranks. Rain gets knocked down, and right as he's about to get hit by the low-rank student's lightning, he takes the ground and throws sand into the student's eyes. Taking advantage of the guy not being able to see, our protagonist lands a punch right in his face. That makes the rest of the students nervous. The same guy from before wonders how Rain knows techniques from the Osarius style. Ellen says she was curious about that too. The hooded observers notice the guy doesn't seem able to counterattack anymore, since Rain has fast calculations for 3, star magic, and the Osarius style. His skill itself is flawless, but his man management is still rough on that front. Krista is ahead of him. One of the boys says Rain took the other student down without even using magic. Still, since Rain looks completely out of mana, if they team up they might have a chance. Ilan thinks using Belsidius to stop the fire serpent definitely drained all of his mana. The boys decide to attack in turns. Marhana thinks helping others is a noble act, but if you don't have the strength for it, it's nothing more than a pointless gesture. She wonders what the boy is planning to do. Our protagonist faces the boys with the little strength he has left. He throws a punch charged with electricity, electrocuting all the low-ranked students who rush him. That ends up impressing the teachers. Zigger asks when the boy cast that spell and how he still has mana left. Then Kyle explains that Rain actually doesn't have any mana left, and that it was really the lightning sword's original attribute. He kept it in the plasma state, and the moment the students touched the wet ground, Rain released the electric shock. Still, knowing how to do something doesn't mean you can pull it off, and honestly, Kyle says the boy looks pretty experienced. One of the boys says it's no surprise Rain is one of the top contenders for first place, but now he's out of tricks. But just as he's about to tell him to attack Rain while they still can, the other guy smacks him in the face. Agreeing with him, and wrapping his body in mud, the guy says now he can beat Rain by himself. Logan asks what that is, and Krista explains it's apparently a spell that boosts physical abilities using mud. But it's a terrible skill for team fights, since it depends on brute strength. Now, with his whole body covered in hardened mud, the guy says Rain can just hand over his points and everyone will walk away unharmed. But our protagonist refuses instantly, without even thinking. The guy jumps, saying Rain seems to think he's joking, and Rain just sighs. When he lands, the guy declares he'll tear Rain to pieces. But when he looks around, he finds Rain already right in front of him, gripping his staff and about to drive it into him with a thrust. After striking him with the staff, our protagonist uses a lightning spell, maximizing the damage. As he pushes him back, Rain says the Osarius technique staff style was created by the one walking at his side, so he shouldn't underestimate him. The guy thinks that even after everything, Rain still has strength, and that last attack left him with intense pain in his stomach. He wonders if he was wrong about Rain being tired, but then realizes Rain has definitely hit his limit. He remembers the test gives an F rank to anyone who fails. Actually, the reason the faculty council is watching so closely is to adjust grades afterward. In other words, the process matters too. But the boys didn't just fail to get points, they also lost to someone relying entirely on staff techniques with no mana. It wouldn't just be his grave he'd have to worry about, he'd become a laughingstock, and he could even get expelled. Rain says that, still, if he survives, he could end up with an E rank or even a C or B, depending on how many people drop out. Behind him, the fight between Lillian and Gertrude is getting more intense. Looking at that, Rain says that with the two main contenders fighting like that, the place wouldn't take long to turn into rubble. The exam was almost over, and he wasn't planning to get involved in that fight, so he tells the guy to just make his choice already, asking if he'd rather give up and settle for a B rank, or keep going and get kicked out. Rain says he should decide fast right as a tree trunk crashes down next to them. Breaking out in a cold sweat, the man thinks a B rank wouldn't be so bad, but then changes his mind, thinking it's way below his skill level. Desperate, he wonders if he's lost it, because if he quit now, he'd be an idiot. I mean, anyone could see the kid in front of him was already out of strength. Plus, he'd used up all the energy he had left on that last hit, and if he finished him off right there, the kid's points would be his. Getting up, he wonders why he's hesitating so much, because an opportunity like that wouldn't come again. He had to do it, otherwise, he'd be expelled. The guy was sure he could pull it off. But the moment he's about to rush in, Rain stares at him with a deadly look. The big guy freezes in fear, and the next second Rain hits him with another electric shock. Right then, the end of the exam is announced, and all the students have to leave the barrier. Rain celebrates because it's finally over, then collapses on the ground, passing out from exhaustion. The big guy, who'd been worried up until then, smiles in relief. Saying it's finally over, Carolyn asks if Ellen was anxious too, and the woman says not really. But then the teachers notice something. Lillian and Gertrude didn't look like they had any interest in stopping. Kyle, calm as ever, says that could cost them points, and Ziegler says this isn't the time to talk about that, because at that point, the two of them had totally lost it. Marna mutters about how annoying it is to deal with kids, and tapping her staff on the ground, she removes the barrier from the area. Just as Lillian and Gertrude are about to start throwing punches at thin air, they snap back to their senses. Grumpy Marhana asks what the point of having skills is if you're still just a child. Then are told again that the exam is over, and they need to leave the barrier. Gertrude touches her face and realizes all her injuries are gone. That's when she remembers it was all an illusion. That was the barrier's magic. Gertrude looks at Lillian, and Margana yells at them to get out while she's still being nice. The angry teacher wonders how many times she has to repeat herself for them to get it. The hooded people question how they could break the barrier, since there was still the exam for Group C. Marhana, on the other hand, says they should just put it back up. The students head back to the test lobby, and Lillian asks the boy what he did to Yomang. He says he doesn't know, and she yells at him to answer seriously. So Rain tells her to answer his question first. He asks if she respects her father, The veins in the girl's eyes bulge, and she asks if he's trying to start a fight right there. Rain says no, and she asks what that was supposed to mean then. He says he thought she was kind of like him. After all, she planned to climb to first place by crushing everyone in her way, and that was her father's will. And the way she tried to burn everyone else for the sake of her goal wasn't any different from what he heard about her dad. But if that's the life she wants, then nothing he says is going to matter. Then the girl reveals she was the one who defeated the fire emoji. Rain says if she keeps acting like this, they're going to end up facing each other soon, and then he'll show her the right way. So she'd better be ready. Angry, she asks what he would know he was born into a happy family, with everything handed to him. When the kids get there, Logan and Krista are waiting for them. Smiling, Gertrude asks if the girl is ready to do well. Embarrassed, Krista bunks the girl on the head, saying she's more than ready. She says the girl has a big mouth and just blurts out whatever nonsense comes to mind. Rain asks Logan what's going on, and Logan says it's nothing. Krista says she was super embarrassed with everyone staring, and Gertrude says it's true, so Krista says she's going to shut that big mouth of hers. While holding the girl by her clothes, Krista looks at Rain and asks him why he was messing around earlier. Our main guy asks what she's talking about, and Krista, telling him to stop playing dumb, says he'd saved Gertrude from the snake earlier. The boy then asks how she thinks he could have done that, and that Lillian's magic must have, coincidentally, run out. A bit reluctantly, Krista agrees. Turning to Gertrude, she says the girl should get punished. Rain was walking along, all happy, and Logan asks what he's laughing about. Rain says he just thought it was funny, because if he hadn't come there, he wouldn't have had that experience. Logan comments that, just like expected, DeLayton was different from other schools. Rain says that was true sometimes, which leaves Logan confused. Rain thinks that if Esther hadn't left that letter, and if the privilege of meeting Lynn were given to the top student in the class, he wouldn't have had that experience. He realizes that, in the end, Esther was right. That world really was fascinating. Gertrude watches Krista walk over to Lillian. Standing in front of Lillian, Krista says she did something pretty interesting with her servant. Lillian is confused about what she means. Krista says she'd better be ready, because she'll pay that debt 100 times over, since the Warden family doesn't leave debts unpaid. Back at the academy, the students were completely wiped out. Still, the exams kept going like nothing had happened. On the night of the 4th day, they had a written exam. And on the morning of the 5th day, they had what the students called hell. Something even harder than the battle royale had happened. And just like that, the chaotic midterm exams came to an end. With the exam results in, Ziegler reveals that 4 students earned rank S scores in both the practical and written tests. They were Krista Warden, Nora Redden, Keaton, and Rain Ludwig. But only one student could take first place, so they do a bonus point evaluation. Also, to keep things fair, any teacher with family or academic ties would be excluded from the evaluation. Regular teachers could give 1 bonus point, Professor Kyle could give 2, and in Marhana's case, it would be 3 points total. One of the teachers says that if they looked at her points, they'd understand her evaluation. Another teacher says that's not the point, and that in terms of talent, Nora is more exceptional. Caroline says she's being buttered up, and the teacher just complains. Time passes while they talk, and Ziegler says they should discuss the current score. Krista Warden is in the lead with 6 points, followed by Nora Redden with 4, Keaton with 3, and Rain Ludwig with 2. Now he asks for Assistant Professor Luke's vote. Luke says Krista really is perfect. Nora's magical precision is also really impressive, and Cadet Keaton showed incredible skill blending music with magic. But even so, for the future of magic, he's going to cast his vote. Ziegler is surprised when he reads the paper. He says the one who got the assistant professor's 2 votes was Rain Ludwig, shocking the others. The teachers reflect that he's definitely on another level, but Krista still has the most points, and the final vote is from Senior Professor Marhana, who never gives extra points, always starting with "no one deserves them," so the student of the year would be Krista. But Marhana breaks into a smile and bursts out laughing, repeating stuff about the future of magic and saying that honestly, he, the guy who uses cheesy lines to win girls over, grew up with a pretty smooth tongue. Luke says it's all thanks to the master's teachings. She agrees and floats a piece of paper and a pen with her hand, saying she'll go along with that vote as an investment in the future of magic. She writes on the paper, leaving the teachers freaked out. Ziegler is speechless when the paper lands in his hand. It says the best freshman this year in the midterm tests was Rain Ludwig. In his room, Rain says he improved like expected. Rudin tells him he can keep researching his unique magic in the circulating environment, with his progress going up by 0.8%. Rain says that if unique magic levels only grow through fighting, it makes him wonder what that would be like. And then it was time to head out. In the past, Frida drinks a magic potion. Then she tosses it away, until a voice calls her name. Kyle asks her to share some too, but Free says she doesn't have any left. He says he knows she has more, and the Mage replies that she drank it all without sleeping for 4 days, and there wasn't any left. But he complains, warning Lynn. When her journey is over, she wants to know why he doesn't visit her sanctuary on Red Mountain. There was this thing called Dragon's Breath, this amazing elixir, and she was going to give it to him since his mana was about to shoot up like a rocket. Kyle asks if she can really just hand something like that over so easily. Freedy asks what he thinks she is. She's the priestess who serves the fire dragon Dakidun, and she'd treat him well on a trip to Red Mountain. Rain repeats that to himself, thinking it was probably prepared really carefully, so accepting it was just the polite thing to do. Even after 300 years, he says he hadn't forgotten. It was in 1 8-hour trip to the peak of Red Mountain. Since the fire dragon Dakidun led his legion and stayed there for almost 1,000 years, the mystical mana had seeped into the whole area. Over time, tons of believers, mages, and witches turned that land into a sacred place. Worn out, Rain kept climbing. Then, someone calls out to him. It was a man, asking where he was rushing off to. The man asks if, by any chance, he was planning to loot the mountain. Rain gets wary of the sketchy guy. The stranger notices and says he doesn't need to be that careful. He says the kid must have a good reason to loot a place like that, and that he's only there to give him some advice. Telling the kid to listen closely. He says the place is dangerous. Ever since it was abandoned 300 years ago, no looter has come back alive. Rain asks if that's because someone's in there. And while he's eating, the man says people talk that a demon summoned by the priestess guards the place. Rain asks if it's really a demon because it doesn't make sense for a demon to be guarding a sanctuary. The man says, honestly, people just call it a demon, they don't actually know what it is. He says once, when he worked up the nerve to climb the mountain, he almost died. Like, one more step and he would have been done for. Before the man can even finish, Rain just keeps going. As a final warning, the old guy says if the kid values his life, he shouldn't go anywhere near the entrance. As he leaves, Rain thanks him for the warning. If some kind of monster really was living inside the sanctuary, Rain figures he should be extra careful. Night falls, and Rain keeps climbing. He can hear animals along the way. Rain says he hates monsters like spider rats. In a flashback, Freedy asks if that's supposed to be the group's mage. Esther says yes, and comments on how cute he is. Freedy says even her bird is cuter, and Esther says that's not fair. Rain asks why they're comparing him to a pigeon, and an annoyed Freed snaps back that it's a parrot. Back in the present, Rain says he wishes he could be like Pippi. After walking for a while, he finally reaches the temple. He says just getting there was already exhausting. On top of that, he's not sure where to start, and decides to try the temple entrance first. Rain notices that even this temple supposedly built by the fire dragon hadn't held up against time. After thinking for a bit, he realizes that even though people said there was a demon there, he couldn't feel any presence at all. He passes through the gates, and then this intense glow appears above his head. When he looks up, he sees something that looks like a phoenix flying over the temple. The monster dives at him. Rain barely dodges, but the paper he was carrying gets burned up. Casting a spell, he says that's a pretty terrible way to welcome someone. A wall rises up in front of him, and the bird slams right into it. The monster screeches in pain and takes off fast. Rain notices something weird about the sound it makes. Remembering the past, he realizes the flames were actually the bird Pippi. The firebird blasts a jet of flame at him, and he dodges. While he's running, Rain remembers the time the bird burned his hair. He thinks that can't be possible. 300 years have passed. But then again, maybe it's still possible. Swallowing nervously, Rain turns around and asks if the bird is really Pippi. He dodges again, and the phoenix streaks past him, kicking up a huge gust of wind. Rain keeps yelling, saying he's Rin. At that moment, the bird seems to snap out of it and lands next to him. Rain confirms it, making the bird remember the past. He says they even used to compete over who got to be the mascot, but the bird says he isn't Rin, because the guy looks different, and it doesn't recognize that face. Going back into a rage, the bird fires off a blast of flames at the boy, who blocks it with a shield made of water magic. Even though the situation was a mess, Rain couldn't help feeling happy, knowing Pippi was still alive after 300 years. Calling out to the bird, the boy says that even if his face looks different now, he's still Rin. But the bird didn't seem like it wanted to listen, attacking again and forcing Rain to throw up another barrier. Rain wonders what he's supposed to do. There had to be something only they would know, something that would make the bird realize it was really him. Then Rain remembers something and starts casting a water spell. He shoots it at the bird, knocking it down. Then he casts another spell, this time with 2 magic circles. He calls out to the bird again, forming a sphere of water and asking if it still didn't recognize him. Our video ends here. If you liked it, leave your like. See you next time. Bye-bye.